definite thought. You say LA, you say Charlotte. Seattle. What are your thoughts of Seattle when someone asks you, tell me about Seattle, and they're from Mars?
Seattle is a beautiful community that has brought urban life and green space together in a really artful way. And it's a space of innovation and a space of connection too. We've been leading the way in a number of areas and ways. And this is I truly believe and know it is a wealthy community. We've had a tremendous amount of wealth built in this community. I'm running because I'd like to see that wealth shared more broadly. But I think Seattle holds a lot of promise for being able to truly be the world-class city that we all want. But truly, I love Seattle. I love the communities across this city, which is why I'm so excited to be running to represent all of Seattle.
Okay. In the last debate, former President Trump mentioned Seattle. And he described it as Seattle was taken over. If you live in Seattle, you know what went on. So for you, that period of time that there was a chop and a jazz, a lot of things happened over that period of time. A lot of people felt that the council members were disconnected and were really not in tune with the residents of Seattle. What are your thoughts about Chop Chaz, that whole period of time that occurred?
Yeah, it's kind of a blur now in these moments, since that was really, we were still in the first year of the pandemic. There was the active, threat of this virus that we didn't have a vaccine for. And so when I think about that time, I think about a community in pain and crying out for solutions and connection. And we saw a lot go down in this city, I think, in response to a myriad of social problems that I don't think we fully resolved. But when I think about that time, I think about some of the connections I've made and the way that I felt that people were looking out for me when I was out marching for justice.
And I'm asking you, and I'm going to get in your Kool-Aid a little bit, because there were things that came up, defund the police, which again caused a lot of friction for some folks at that period of time. And the way that it came out, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that in the election that took place, folks were looking for something a little different. Where do you stand on what you would say are some of the critical issues that are impacting and affecting Seattle residents? We have, some people would say that homelessness and unsheltered folks, that is an issue.
Yes.
For some folks, it's equity and equality in this city. What for you? What are and you can name one, or you can name three, or you can name five key issues that are important to you that you'd like to share with our audience right now, who are trying to make up their minds about who they want to be this at-large, citywide city council person for position number 8.
I think affordability is really front of mind for many people across our community.
Affordability
and across the board. When we're talking about housing affordability, whether you're a renter, whether you're also somebody trying to buy a home, and then we see homelessness, of course, in our streets. Being able to address the housing crisis and invest in the housing that we need, whether it be in terms of building the housing we need or subsidizing as well, being able to address the housing crisis wholeheartedly. And that is going to require resources that we do not have, as best exemplified by our city's budget deficit, which is currently $260 million. So I'm really in this and focused on also how do we fully fund our city services that some of us know and love and others of our community members truly depend on every day. And so making sure that we are investing in those city services. And I've been firm in this race saying that we need corporations to pay what they owe to this community. And I've been a strong proponent for progressive taxation. Washington has an upside down tax code. Our lowest income and middle income community members are paying disproportionately more into taxes when relative to their own income. And so how can we take steps on the local level to try and address that and have our communities see investment back into them? I'm a huge believer in making sure we're investing in people and investing in solutions that we know work too.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions. I know you have a debate to go to, but again, this is an opportunity for our community to hear from you without a soundbite that you have to deliver in a minute or something like that. So this is again an at-large citywide council position. Why should folks who live in the various districts that make up the 1 through 7 feel like you would be a good representative, or do you even feel like you have to represent the entire city with this position?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know I bring the identities and personal experience in the communities that I've been most connected with throughout my work and personal life. But I'm also a strong believer.
Which communities are those?
Yeah, so working in homelessness and human services and folks that are doing frontline work, being Latina, being a queer person, those are I've built a lot of connections in those communities and understand those perspectives also as a renter and somebody who doesn't own a car too, knowing intimately what it's like to be taking 3 buses to get where you need to go. And so those perspectives, experiences, and community connections are what I bring. But I'm a firm believer in partnership and learning from others and going to folks who have been doing the work for a long time and connecting and saying, what do you know and understand about this issue? What should I be able to know about and champion in partnership with you? And so what I would offer to this moment is a strong experience and a lot of expertise working in partnership. I've worked across 39 cities and with over 100 different organizations in my career. And I've done consensus building work and really done the hard work of putting the issue on the table and bringing people together around solutions and making them happen. And that's what I have to offer in this moment, a real approach in bringing people together and doing that good partnership building work and being able to say, well, I don't know. And I want to learn from experts, learn from people directly, and be able to champion that.
Our communities in Seattle are very different. I live in South Seattle. They call it the most diverse community in the country. We have Martin Luther King County, which is the only municipality named after Dr. King. Then you have other communities that are also very different and have very different needs. And so I'm just going to bring up this issue of unsheltered folks, homeless folks, whatever the terminology is that you want to do, where some communities go, whoa, we need to make sure that this isn't something that's visible. I don't want this in my community. I don't want to go to the grocery store and have somebody standing in front, pressuring me and bothering me. And then you have other communities that are saying, well, wait a minute, you can't criminalize being homeless. So for you, what does that look like when you think that, there's not a one size fits all? As the, again, at-large citywide representative, tell me about your thoughts about that, and again, why folks who live in either whatever community is that you live in should feel however they're going to feel as you take on this position and how you're going to navigate this.
Totally. I really appreciate that question, and I'm glad you brought up that we are in the wonderful Martin Luther King Jr. County here. Of course, originally named after a different king with much more unsavory roots, but renamed because of former King County Councilmember Larry Gossett's leadership, who has endorsed my campaign. And
Eddie Rye was very instrumental in that, and often doesn't get, because the history is written by whoever writes it, but I'm just bringing that up anyway.
No, thank you for naming that. Actually,
Eddie Rye Jr. also critical, along with King County Councilmember Larry Gossett Jr.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm really glad you named that.
Are you familiar with Mr. Rye?
I'm not, but I would love to know more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, you
But,
go ahead and answer the question.
but I honor that and want to bring up just the county level because that's where I've done a lot of my work actually is working countywide on homelessness and being able to work across 39 cities and with over 100 different organizations. Again, there's a lot of complexity in there. We know many there are many different kinds of folks that are experiencing homelessness and have different kinds of needs. Different homelessness can happen to almost anybody. There are so many different causes, and I've worked with a family that has been living out of a van in Georgetown, who is unhoused because of medical debt, to somebody who has been downtown struggling with behavioral health conditions or struggling with addiction, to working with somebody who is actively trying to work but just got evicted and can't afford rent. So there's a spectrum of folks across the board of who may be experiencing homelessness, who were brought into homelessness for different reasons. Paired with that, I've worked with all these different cities who all have different local services available to them, and different landscapes and connections to services. So I've done work out in the Snoqualmie Valley where I can tell you right now there is one shelter out there. And the way we see homelessness show up in that community is really different. And being able to work alongside those city partners and the one provider out there to balance and understand how do we work and address issues here in this space and try and connect and build a larger strategy that's appropriate for each community. And so I bring this up to say this has been a lot of my work for the past couple of years of how do we create that balance, bring people at the table and unite them around. We need to come up with a solution. We can all agree it is devastating and hard for our community to see folks who are outside. It's even harder for the folks who are actually outside and can't get access to housing. And so that's been a lot of the work that I've done over the past couple of years is just holding space for that complexity, a lot of big feelings, a lot of politics, and still being able to shepherd and say, how are we going to come together to do something about this?
You see, I give you the room
I appreciate that.
to answer these questions. I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to our audience and give them your final words or whatever it is that you'd like to communicate. Again, this is candidate Alexis Rinck. You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is the pre-debate show for Seattle City Council position number 8. I am Tony B. We'll be back here after the debate to talk to the candidates about what they thought and how it went. Alexis, I want to give you this opportunity to share with our audience whatever it is that you want to share, what that you would like them to know. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I really appreciate that opportunity. And I think I just start with an abundance of gratitude. Running for office and building the coalition that we have has been a true honor, maybe one of the biggest honors I've had in my life, to be able to bring people together and to put issues on the table and really rally around how are we going to solve this and build a community we all want to live in together. And would share we've done exactly that. We've built a really strong coalition. We've actually united the entire Democratic Party. We have a bunch of legislative districts that exist in the city of Seattle. All of them have endorsed this campaign. We've also united our labor community, not just with the MLK Labor Council weighing in and endorsing this campaign, but over 10 different separate unions representing incredible frontline staff doing the work, from laborers, nurses, childcare workers, machinists who are on strike right now, and so many others. And then lastly, we've also gotten the support of amazing organizations that do good work, such as Planned Parenthood, Votes, as well as the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. So I would just close by saying we're doing the hard work of really talking about the issues, but we've also proven that we are uniting the city. And in a moment of intense division, I think it's notable that we have a message that is uniting people together, and we're committed to continuing to build, partner, talk, and learn about the issues that are impacting your communities.
All right. Well, there's your opportunity to find out more about candidate Alexis Rinck. Again, this is your vote. The reason that we are here is to provide you with information to make you a more informed voter. It's your vote. Use it wisely. Again, presidential election is cool and fine and everything, but these are the folks who are closer to where you live, that impact issues that impact and affect you directly. Alexis, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And good luck. And I'm going to be saying good luck to candidate Woo as well, to you. Thank you.
you.
Mhm. It's me, Tony B. I know we have someone else joining us. Again, that was candidate Alexis Rinck. I hope you got to find out something more about candidate Rinck that you didn't know before. Okay, not from Seattle, but says Seattle is home, running for office right here in Seattle. Do we have someone else coming up? Is that? Yeah, I'm ready if we're ready.
Yeah.
This is Josh?
Yep.
Hey, Josh, did we get the
Are we good?
oh, you're good.
Yeah. All right.
Josh, how are you, my
I'm
man?
doing well. How are you, Tony?
Oh, man, I'm fantastic. I think it's important to be civically engaged. And I
Yeah.
think that everyone should feel that way. You are going to be one of the moderators.
I am moderating this debate tonight. We're going to try to get those candidates talking about what they really think about the issues. Really try to help the audience understand the difference between them, because these are two different politicians. They're coming at city issues from different places, and so yeah, got some questions lined up about homelessness and affordable housing, crime and policing.
Okay.
A little preview for folks out there, but I think I saw an audience question in there about like what do they want to do for the Rainier Valley and think about the Southeast Seattle, and I know that's of utmost importance to your viewers and listeners.
Yeah. Well, this is Rainier Avenue Radio,
Yeah.
so that's how. But this is for everybody, so we're asking. But yeah, I definitely, unashamedly, advocate on behalf of our community and our listeners who oftentimes our messages aren't given publicly the way that we'd like them to give. That's why we're on the air. That's why we try to amplify the voices of our community. Now, this moderator position, which is, essentially in the past has been kind of, well, the moderator's not the central focus, but lately this interest in the moderators has changed, due to the presidential election. How do you see your role as a moderator? And in the last debate and in debates that come up, the question is, well, it's who's going to moderate, and how's this going to be for you as a moderator? How are you taking this, Josh? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, this is an important job. I think luckily the stakes are just as high and important for a local election like this. I think luckily for us,
I think they're higher.
I think luckily we got candidates who are not going to be spouting off lies left and right on stage, and so we'll keep it. It's going to. I think the temperature will be a lot cooler than a presidential debate, but that doesn't mean we're not up there to keep them honest, and like people on the campaign trail like to say a thing, and I cover city politics. I'm covering City Hall for Cascade PBS, and I think I know these issues pretty well, and so I'm going to be listening intently. And if somebody says a thing, I'm going to try to follow up and keep them honest up there.
This is for Seattle City Council position 8, which is an at-large position, a citywide position. Does that make a difference in your approach to asking questions and what that looks like, what that sounds like? And in your opinion, is this position supposed to be someone who represents the entire city?
I think first of all, yes, I do think this is a position that is supposed to be repping the entire city. These city council folks are elected to represent the people, and the citywide position, that's just more people to represent. But I think it's a little different. I moderated one of the district races last year, and at that district sort of neighborhood level, people have different issues. Maybe the issues in the Rainier Valley might be slightly different than up in Sandpoint, Northeast Seattle, but like also a lot of the big issues are equally important to sort of everybody. Without making too much of a generalization, I think a lot of folks across the city are worried about housing affordability, worried about homelessness and people camping out on the street, worried about the fentanyl crisis.
That's a big one. Yeah, that's a big one. We're actually going to be starting an awareness campaign here pretty quickly to the dangers of fentanyl. And a lot of people aren't even aware of the impact that it's having on families, communities here. Anyway, I'm getting on my little soapbox a bit.
No, it's a good soapbox to be on. And like I was saying, just like those big issues, no matter what neighborhood you're in, they're touching you in some way, and maybe you're coming at it from a slightly different angle. But I think, a lot of those big issues are critical for our city council members to address, whether they're repping the whole city or they are a district council member.
Again, this is the pre-debate show. The debate is Seattle City Council position number 8. And Josh Cohen is here. He is one of the moderators. He's one of the people that I'm going to say is going to set the tone for whatever this debate is going to be, whatever it's going to look like. Josh, again, is a reporter for Cascade PBS. And I'm going to get in your mix a little bit here, Josh, because I just think people should know who the moderators are.
Yeah.
Where are you from? Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Pennsylvania originally.
Okay.
I moved out to Seattle in 2009. So been here a little bit of time, but not as long as some folks. Been with Cascade PBS. We used to be called Crosscut. Been there for about 5 years now, and covering affordable housing and homelessness and transportation, and now focused on sort of city hall, city politics. But of course, city politics is all of those big issues.
What made you want to be a reporter? What made you interested in journalism?
Yeah, I fell into it kind of coincidentally, just like sat next to the editor of the student paper in a film class early on in college, and I was like, oh, that seems interesting. And it is just like, what a privilege. Like, I love talking to people and hearing their stories, and love digging into politics and policy and trying to help people understand what's going on in the city. And at its best, it's a great job. And again, there's so much important going on in the city at all times, and so it's a privilege to be able to try to tell those stories and try to keep politicians accountable, if not honest. And
what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? What brings you joy when you're not covering politics? Or maybe that's
No, covering politics is not a hobby, at least not for me. But I live in Hillman City with my wife and our dog, and love spending time in Hillman and getting coffee at Onda, and hanging out in Columbia City. But also I like riding bikes and getting out of the city and going on hikes. And it's a wonderful place we live.
Yeah. Well, Josh, man, we really appreciate you moderating this debate. Again, from my perspective, the moderators can set the tone for what happens here. We can have the candidates get up there and not really answer any questions. And depending on what the questions are, it could impact how people are going to vote, which is the whole purpose of having this debate, to help people make up their minds about which candidate that they want to cast their vote for. So I'm going to get in your mix a little bit again. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Being that you've been here since 2009, what do you, and this is going to be like my last question here. What do you enjoy about Seattle? And then by the same token, what is it about Seattle that you would like to see changed, improved?
Again, Seattle.
I hope you enjoy something about Seattle.
I love this place. Seattle is a beautiful city, and we have all these bodies of water, and we have the mountains and the forests, and there's all of that, but also the city itself is great, and we have so many great neighborhoods, and just a real, neighborhoods have their own flavor, and it's a fun city. At that same token, it is an incredibly expensive city. I wish it was not nearly so expensive. My wife and I are renters. We're plenty lucky to be stably housed. I wish that this was a city that could get a handle on its homelessness population, or let me say that again, homelessness crisis. It's a real issue, and there's a lot of folks struggling out there, and it is hard out there, and there's a lot that could be improved.
All right, I'm gonna let you go here in a second. You are one of the moderators. Share with our audience what you would like to see, whatever that is, out of those two candidates who are on that debate stage. What would you like to see happen? How would you like as the moderator,
Yeah,
asking the questions?
yeah.
What are you hoping
I
for?
want to see these candidates tonight really dig into the issues, dig into the policy, really help people understand the differences in their stances. People on the campaign trail, they like to talk high level, keep it sort of 10,000 feet, and I think the more politicians can drill down into, here's what I think, here's how I think it's going to make things better, the better, your listeners, the viewers on TV tonight of the debate will really understand who they're going to vote for.
Yeah. Well, I know you got to get up there, Josh. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having
Appreciate
me.
you taking the time to do this, and thank you for also being a moderator at this debate.
All right.
All right. And it's almost call time, but I know candidate Woo is here. And hello, Tanya, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Good to see you. I'm not going to keep you long because I know you have the debate coming up, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I give you the same space. The purpose of this is to let our audience, our listeners know who the candidates are. And he's going to.
Oh, okay. Use the mic. There we go. Now you can hear me.
Okay. Who the candidates are that they may be unfamiliar with. You ran for District 2, very close race. Then you were selected to be the District 8 council person. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We all knew that the election was coming up. You're running again. Um, where are you from? Where were you born? Give us some background information on who you are.
Yes. I was born here in Seattle. I grew up on Beacon Hill. My family had a lot of restaurants. I don't know if you remember Moon Temple Restaurant on Wallingford. We also had bakeries. We had a bakery on U District, in the Seattle Center House, also in the Chinatown International District. So I grew up as a little kid following my parents to the restaurant or to the neighborhood bakery and just working there. I grew up, I went to school in North Seattle. I now live in Rainier Valley. And some of the things I'm really proud about is developing affordable housing in the heart of our city. I also helped put together a volunteer group called Community Watch. And we go out, we're 4 years strong. We still go out once a week, trying to help connect our unhoused neighbors to resources, also building trust with our small business and our mini residents who live in the neighborhood. And so these are all things that really pay into my perspective going forward.
This is an at-large position, which you're in it right now, a citywide position. What are some of the issues that are near and dear to you in the city of Seattle that you feel strongly about, that you want to share with those who are listening and watching right now, who are trying to make up their minds about who they want to vote for?
Yeah, so things I'm really passionate about include building more affordable housing. Like my family renovated the Louisa Hotel into workforce housing, which only charges our tenants a percentage of their income. So no one's forced to pay rent that they cannot afford. And I want to do more of that for the entire city. So I'm working on pieces of legislation to do that. Something I'm really passionate about is public safety, but in a more compassionate, on the ground approach that involves building trust between our unhoused neighbors, people battling addiction, and just being out there every single night and trying to get people to accept services, I think is something I'm really interested in. So things like expanding the care team, LEAD, REACH, We Deliver Care, Urban Family, all those programs are amazing. But at the same time, we were in encampment while there was a shooting 3/10 away from us. And for that, we need police. And so we'd love to get more officers, the police department fully staffed so that there could be more community policing, so we get our call times down, as well as, having the department involved in Before the Badge program, where they get to go to different communities and learn about the people there. And so I think it's going to be a comprehensive approach. It's going to take a balanced approach, and it's going to take it from have everybody contribute to help relieve the challenges that we're seeing out there.
Okay, I'm just going to get a couple more questions to you that I asked of candidate Rinck.
Great.
And so I want to get your responses to these as well. In the last presidential debate, Seattle came up.
Oh my God, yes.
And former President Trump said the
Oh.
whole city of Seattle was, if you live in Seattle, you know it wasn't the entire city.
Oh no, it was not, yes.
But I'd just like to get your take on that period of time and your thoughts for folks who may be watching from outside of Seattle here and saying, well, wait a minute, I want to hear more about Seattle and what takes place there and who the folks are who are elected officials. And as I mentioned, you know, it was a period of time that was very contentious, and I think that for some of the city council members, they came under fire for maybe being disconnected or maybe folks wanting something different. Your thoughts on that period of time that former President Trump brought up as nationalism, talking about Seattle was taken over?
Oh my goodness. So during that time, my involvement was we were just starting the Community Watch, and we stood in solidarity with the BLM movement. And so we were going to BLM marches. And when the marches came through the Chinatown International District, basically we acted as a liaison to the 2,000 seniors who had no idea what was going on. There's a lot of confusion in the Chinatown International District community. So we talked to our elders, we talked to the business owners, we let them know what is happening and how we have to stand in support of our community. And so we were involved in that, and we continue to offer help with security for many of the marches that came through downtown, and provided some support as well. I did go through CHOP or Chaz. I walked through there, and I was just unfortunate how there was a lot of violence. I think first responders should have been allowed to go in there to help resuscitate those who were shot and to get them safely to care. But I wasn't really involved with the whole Chaz CHOP, besides going there once just to see what it was like there. But I mean, there was some good there. I mean, there were stations where people were giving away food. There were healing circles. And so I think having these conversations, but especially how do we promote safety so that no one got hurt, should have been thought of ahead of time.
Okay. This is going to be my last question before I give you an opportunity for final words so you can get ready to do what you need to do for the debate that's coming up. This is an at-large citywide position. Seattle is very diverse. Neighborhoods are, in my opinion, very different from each other. We have a lot of things in common, but neighborhoods are also very different from each other. What would you like to say to those who are listening right now? Let's say, how can I feel comfortable knowing that you will be concerned about the issues that impact my particular communities, 1 through 7 districts?
Yeah, so the reason why I even ran for office was because of a high impact development that came near the Chinatown International District that was put there without any meaningful community input or output. And that told me if my community was not at the table, we were on the menu, and it was happening there, it was happening throughout Seattle. So one of the things I promise to do is authentically listen to communities. I don't appreciate or don't like when other people tell my community or other communities what we should think, what we should do, who dictate in the name of communities of color what should happen. I believe we need to empower community members to really authentically tell their story and get their voices out there. And so my biggest interest is reaching communities that are the furthest away from government. How do we get people involved into the halls of power to tell their stories and to effect change? Because I believe that a lot of the people who are experiencing challenges or issues in their neighborhoods have the solutions. I've not met anybody who didn't know what to do, but they had solutions, and we need to listen, and as a city council member, we need to implement them.
Okay. And finally, I want to give you an opportunity for final words. Whatever you want to say to our listening, watching audience right now, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. So yes, I grew up here. I've seen how Seattle has changed. I've seen the strength of our neighborhoods and the challenges that we have faced. And I went out there and I did something. And I don't consider myself a politician. I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm from the community. And I've built affordable housing. I have a small business. I don't know if you know, but my family owns KUOW restaurants. So I know the challenges facing our small businesses. And I know within a block radius of my small business, there are 6 other businesses that plan to close. They're for sale. They can't make it coming out of the pandemic. It's tough and it's difficult, and we really need to help our communities thrive. So focusing on how do we develop and help small businesses, how do we help entrepreneurship, our youth, late night basketball, get people involved in their passion and what they want to do. Because I believe if we attend to our young people and make sure that our kids are safe, our communities will be safe. And if we help our small businesses, the small businesses all contribute the B&O tax into the general fund. The better our small businesses do, the better our city does. So it's a combination of helping small businesses, our youth, and just giving communities voice that will help our community and our city thrive as a whole.
Oh, I know you got the debate coming up. Thank you for taking the time to stop by here and share this information with us. Tanya, we appreciate it. Thank you for running for office. Thank you for being in office, and thank you for running again.
Well, thank you for all that you do and getting down to the details and the facts. Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Which one?
That
Oh,
is,
there
you've heard from both candidates now. Hopefully you have received information from candidate Woo that provides you a little more insight into where she's coming from, what her issues are that are important, and again, how she will represent the entire city in this at-large position, number 8, citywide. We're going to be back right after debate to have the post-debate conversation so that we can talk to the candidates and find out how they felt about how they did during the debate. Thanks to Josh Cohen for joining us as well, one of the moderators. We'll have a couple moderators join us again after the debate to again share information about how they felt that things went. You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world. It's me, Tony B. Thank you for joining us for this pre-debate show. Big shout out to Converge Media in this partnership. Converge, we appreciate you, and Converge doing incredible things in our community. As a matter of fact, just got a distribution deal, national, with Fox Soul. So some of the content that Converge produces about our communities, they'll be seen nationally as well, and also Seattle City Club. Another great job of putting these events together. We'll be back tomorrow with the State Attorney General debate, but we're going to get ready to go now to the actual debate itself. Let me see here. How much time we got here? Okay, I got a few more minutes before we go to the live debate, which will be actually starting at 7 o'clock. So again, I would like to thank candidate Alexis Rinck for joining us, moderator Josh Cohen for joining us, and again, candidate Tanya Woo for joining us. So Tanya is in this position because Teresa Mosqueda, who was originally the City Council 8 position, ran for King County Council and won, and is now King County Council position 8 council member. And so then the position was filled. Candidate Woo ultimately was selected to fill this position and has been in the position for a few months now. And the election was coming up. Everybody knew that was going to happen. And here it is. You've got the opportunity to make the choice. Which candidate are you going to cast your ballot for? Now, this is a big deal. This is your vote. Don't take this lightly. This is a very close race, and your vote is going to have an impact on the outcome of this particular candidacy. Seattle Council position number 8. Again, you've heard me say it before, an at-large position, which means it's citywide. So the 1 through 7 city council positions represent different communities. 8 and 9 are what they call at-large and citywide. What does that look like for you? What is your expectation of an at-large citywide candidate? Well, we've got a debate coming up here in just a couple minutes. They'll be answering some questions. Then we're going to have the post-debate show, and we'll discuss what took place at the debate. Get ready. Once again, you are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world, your community radio station. Some of you may be watching as well on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you're just tuning in, you'll be able to go back and look at these pre-debate shows on demand to help you in your decision-making process. I'd like to thank you for joining us on behalf of Converge Media, Seattle City Club, and behind-the-scene folks like Z and Daniel and Matt and Dre, who are making this thing possible for me just to sit here in front of the camera and rattle off a few things and talk to the contestants. We appreciate you. It's me, Tony B, Rainier Avenue Radio. We're going to take you in a couple minutes here where you're going to be at the debate. And then as soon as the debate's over, we're going to bring you right back here at 8 o'clock, and we're going to have a post-debate conversation. And so I've said this in the number of years that I've been doing broadcasts and been doing radio, and I'll say it again. Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you cannot, you are probably right. We'll be back right after debate. Peace.
Did you turn up your radio wherever you at? We about to bring it. Street Beat. Yeah. With Tony B.
Tony B will give you a chance to tackle local, national, and international issues that affect your community.
Street Beat. Street Beat. Tony.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We ask that community, and this is what they have to say.
Black generational wealth. For a long time, it's been a dream that needs to see reality. For hundreds of years, Black people have been in the United States and have suffered for it. We've built this country, but have not yet really seen the dream come alive and what that means for Black people and people of color. This is going to take some time and some work and a lot of sacrifice, but people of color have always done that, and so it won't be any different. You don't need to do it alone, and you don't need to do it alone, because this is a community work project. It's going to take some rigor. It'll take a change in mindset for individuals and the community and the nation at large. This won't be simple, but that's okay. Nothing that's good or worthwhile is ever really simple.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio .world. Rainier Avenue Radio. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to say.
To me, generational wealth means access to joy. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it can buy a lot of things that make it easier. I find that when your basic needs are met, it's a lot easier to work on other things. Like even for myself as an artist, like I'm not the best creative, I'm not the best artist when my basic needs aren't being met, and not having to worry about that for yourself, but also for the people closest to you, like your loved ones. To me, that's the beauty of generational wealth. To me, generational wealth is community. It's being able to talk to people and figure out what they need and help them. I feel like especially in Seattle.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Xavier Holmes, Alex Jackson.
From day one, charter public schools set us up for success.
We learn from teachers who create tailored lesson plans
and collaborate with classmates from diverse backgrounds. As a result, many of us outperform students in traditional public schools.
And we all walk away better prepared for our futures.
Learn more at wacharters.org. Paid for by Washington State Charter Schools Association.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to say.
Generational wealth to me means to provide and establish wealth for generations to come, whether it be through real estate or through other equitable funding, stocks, bonds, but first of all, I think that general wealth starts with securing property. And that's it.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhood's Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.org. Create your generational wealth for you and the future of your families.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not being reprimanded by traffic cops, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not shouting, "Ba-dee-ya" at city council meetings, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And back in my day, when we wanted to hear the radio, we had to stick a couple of coat hangers on Grandpa's head so his cavity fillings could pick up an AM station. But it's the 21st century now, so whenever I want to hear Rainier Avenue Radio.world, I listen to it on the brand new Rainier Avenue Radio app on my Android or iPhone. Download it for free at the Google Play Store or the iPhone App Store. The Rainier Avenue Radio.world app. Hi, I'm Paul Pearson of Star Time. Did you know that back in the 1930s, Rainier Avenue Radio operated out of a supply closet in the Columbia City Seafirst Bank? Well, times have changed and so have we. Now you can hear all the great Rainier Avenue Radio shows on our mobile app for Android and iPhone. It's completely free on the Google Play Store and the iPhone App Store. The Rainier Avenue Radio app.
Women are not an homogenous group. We face discrimination differently depending on factors such as ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, and more.
Rainier Avenue Radio is proud to amplify women's voices.
They are the experts of their own lives, initiating conversations within their community about challenges they face, the solutions they're working on, and the opportunities they see.
Please join us this Sunday from 2 to 5 for Women's Voices on Air. We know our challenges. We are the experts of our lives.
We are master multitaskers, prioritizing our family, friends, and our faith above our own needs.
Our needs and voices are too often overlooked.
Please join us this Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. for Women's Voices on Air.
We tell our stories in our own way.
You are listening to
Now, we're going to be asking a range of questions here tonight, including questions submitted by the audience. Tonight's rules: each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement, 45 seconds to answer the initial questions. We will then lead a moderated discussion with 20 seconds for rebuttals or follow-up questions. Finally, we have a 60-second lightning round coming up, and each candidate will end with 60-second closing statements. We do ask our live audience to remain silent from here on out and respectful, no cheers or boos. But you can follow along at home using the hashtag #CAlex. Now we tossed a coin backstage to determine who would have the opening statement here. Alexis, you won. You elected to go first. So Alexis, you have 60 seconds.
Good evening, all. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rinck. I'm a renter and someone who goes to work on a bus. I went from waiting tables next to the Space Needle to working on policy at the UW Tower, and I'm running for Seattle City Council to fight for a city that works for all of us, and not just the wealthy few. And in my work across communities, I gained a reputation for bringing people together around solutions and making them happen. I got my master's degree at the UW, and I've worked across 39 cities and with over 100 different organizations on the housing and health of our communities. And I was brought to this work because of my upbringing. Substance use disorder, prison, and homelessness affected my family. But I was given the tools I needed to heal thanks to my grandparents, great teachers, and afternoons at the Boys and Girls Club. And I am here today as a living testament to when we invest in young people, regardless of their beginnings, we can change generations. Division is everywhere, but this is the campaign that is uniting Seattle. We brought together advocates and the Democratic Party, but most importantly, the majority of voters made it clear in August who they trust to continue uniting Seattle. Thank you.
Okay, and Tanya, you have 60 seconds.
I'm Councilmember Tanya Woo, representing Seattle on the City Council, and a proud former student of Seattle College's. I took classes right here on this campus. Tonight, my goal is simple: to show the contrast and the difference between my opponent and myself, and how important it is to push our city forward with solutions and real action items. I grew up on Beacon Hill, went to school in North Seattle, and now live in Rainier Valley. I've tackled our city's toughest challenges head on. I've seen what's happened in Delridge and Denny, from Pinehurst to Lake City. And on my short time on the City Council, I've helped civilize the police department and paid our officers a competitive wage. I expanded the care team, and I made sure and worked to make sure that the King County Homeless Regional Authority was on the right track. Seattle needs leaders dedicated to implementing a more balanced, less ideological approach. We have to move forward. My work speaks for itself, and we'll make progress in every neighborhood.
All right, thank you very much. We want to start off here with public safety and something that is very topical because it just passed yesterday. City Council took a consequential vote on drug and prostitution zones in Seattle, the idea to target drug dealers, pimps, and johns, cut down on violence, specifically gun violence in those areas. Tanya, you voted for this. Can you explain your reason behind it? And then Alexis, how do you feel about this issue? Tanya, you go first.
Yes, I am part of a volunteer group. We're going 4 years strong called Community Watch. We go to 12th and Jackson. We know who are out there. We see them, we see people selling drugs. We see people also carrying guns, and we are afraid. But we also know who are the people who need resources and need help. And so removing the drug sellers away from a situation and allowing resources and for people to heal on 12th and Jackson, which is also Weller, as well as on King. When it comes to SOAP, which is the loitering and prostitution bill, we are targeting pimps and johns. We want to help young people. I have seen young people who were raped, who were attacked and beaten, and were basically controlled by their johns or their pimps. And so how do we remove them from that situation so that we could do the outreach and get them the resources they need?
Alexis?
Public safety continues to be a huge issue facing our community, and it's the number one thing I hear at the doors. People are not feeling safe going to school or going to their work, and I've been spending time in 911 dispatch and on ride-alongs to further understand our public safety system. But I want to be clear with this, and let's be clear that drawing lines on city maps, and let's be clear that people don't disappear. And while the council member has stated that they're providing resources, we have yet to see additional resources brought into the system to date. Banishment laws have been tried before, and a number of community organizations that have been doing the work alongside folks in these affected areas have weighed in against this, and notably the ACLU has weighed in against this. And so I think we need to be promising the public comprehensive solutions that truly solve the problem at hand and take quick action to do so.
I just want a quick follow-up. You would have voted against this
Correct.
Proposal. Okay. You want a rebuttal?
Yes.
20 seconds.
Thank you. So we see in Little Saigon, 4 years ago, we did not see what's happening now in 12th and Jackson, 100 people spilling out into the streets. People needed resources and help. And so we cannot go back to the failed policies of the last 4 years. We have to move forward with these new policies that target the people who are doing the most amount of harm to our communities.
Okay. I want to stay with public safety right now because Seattle saw its 36th homicide in the first 6 months of the year. The numbers are sky high compared to before the pandemic. In fact, in 2019, there was just 16 homicides in the first 6 months in the city of Seattle. So my question to you is, do you consider Seattle a safe place? And what is your top priority to make it safer? Alexis, let's start with you.
We need to be building a public safety system that has a quick response and the right response for given public safety scenarios. I'm proudly endorsed by the Alliance for Gun Responsibility because they trust in my approach and the policies I put forward in my platform to really get to the root of addressing gun violence in our communities. And so with that, we have been really focused on how do we scale our resources in gun violence protection, and I'm committed to also working with the state legislature to pass common sense gun reform legislation to make sure that we get there, while also working to make sure that we are improving our first responder staffing across the board, from focusing on increased staffing for police, behavioral health, fire, and emergency medical.
Tanya?
So your question is, do I feel like Seattle's a safe place? I think it depends on who you ask. I mean, we have people who are afraid to go to the grocery store. It's a very basic part of our life, but how people adjust and change to avoid certain situations is just really interesting. I believe in a comprehensive solution, which means fully staffing our first responders, our police, our fire, so we can get our call times down, and we will be able to take our officers out of patrol and into specialized units like community policing. I also would love to see the expansion of the care team, social workers who are going out doing the outreach and engagement. I love groups like LEAD and REACH, We Deliver Care, Urban Family, all these amazing groups that can come together and help. We also need more addiction resources. We need mobile clinics. There's a whole host of things, but it's going to take every one of us to help.
I want to focus in on gun violence here because that's obviously a major concern. Alexis, you mentioned that, but I want to see if you guys have any specific ideas and proposals to get guns out of the hands of criminals and specifically out of the hands of young people. Tanya?
Yes, we see the most amount of crime from a very small group of people, and it's unfortunate how we're seeing younger and younger people get involved. They have dangerous guns that could shoot 100 rounds in a minute. So we need to make sure we have opportunities for our young people to go to ignite their passions, entrepreneurship opportunities, late night basketball. This is what our young people want. Young people coming out of the pandemic need more resources than ever. And I think getting to the root cause of trying to get our young people into issues where they could make or build something and contribute to the community rather than going into unstructured gangs or feeling like they have to feel powerful with a gun. How do we make them feel powerful with a pen?
Alexis?
I've been personally impacted by gang violence, given that that's, my birth parents actually were involved in a gang when they were very young. So this issue is really near and dear to me and important, and I've been careful and paying attention to what our youth are saying. And it's important to note that there was an opportunity to have 20 million going towards mental health supports, going into our schools. That funding was cut in half, and that should be noted. But paired with that, I'm hearing a lot of talk about increasing resources, and yet we're seeing a cut to resources. I support improving and increasing funding for programs such as Community Passageways, which is currently connecting with students across our high schools across the city. But those organizations need resources.
Great. So Seattle, like many cities in the U.S., has struggled to hire police officers and meet its goal of refilling SPD's ranks. Will you continue to work on police hiring, and what can you do differently to move the needle on the issue? Alexis, why don't you go first?
I think there's a lot we can do to learn from other industry partners when we're talking about addressing the needs of our workforce. And given that I was most recently working at the UW, I think the UW is a good example of this. The UW, when working with industry partners such as Microsoft, will work with the legislature to create more enrollment spaces when they want to hire more software engineers. So how are we also building on a more upstream approach, looking at how are we growing our own pool locally and investing in that way? We know we have a national hiring shortage. This is not unique to Seattle. So how are we investing and making sure we invest in the front end, because we want to grow our own pool locally, and homegrown workers tend to stay. So I support those kind of investments, so we can also make sure that we're hiring officers that have the kind of training and cultural competency and de-escalation so they can appropriately serve our communities.
Thank you. Tanya?
So I think this is one of the biggest differences between myself and my opponent is that I support the mayor's plan to hire and fully staff our police department. I also voted for initiatives that include competitive wages. We were, I think, top 20 in the state when it comes to competitive wages, and now we're top 5. I know it's not just about money, but it's also a morale issue. I mean, we did not defund police, you also demoralize police, and 600 officers left the force. We're still 400 short. And so how do we make sure that there are tools and incentives to help police, hiring bonuses, as well as 30 by 30, how do we hire more female officers, more officers that look like us in the community? And so I think things like that are important, as well as different initiatives like I support the drug ordinance, soda, soap, giving officers the tools they need to be successful and listening to what their needs are. And especially, and not only just policing, but firefighters are experiencing a shortage as well.
Thank you. Tanya, continuing with you, what role should the City Council play in working with the police department? Do you see yourself working alongside the department, or do you see the council more focused on oversight and accountability?
So I believe it's a partnership. I've gone on ride-alongs with North Precinct, West Precinct, South Precinct, and learned a lot. I usually go out at night between the hours of 9 to 10 to 3 a.m. to really get to know what our officers are seeing here in the city. And so we walked along the Blade, 3rd Avenue. I've experienced at 12th and Jackson, and just hearing ideas, but also getting out of the police car and talking to community members as well, and hearing what their ideas and seeing what the interactions look like, as well as, I know a lot of communities face the problem of over-policing, under-policing, but I think it's going to take a partnership of not just police and city council, but the community as a whole.
Thank you, Alexis.
Absolutely. I want to also note something I think that is really important as it relates to police hiring is the matter of accountability. And notably, my opponent voted for a Seattle Police Officers Guild contract that did not include improved accountability measures. And I think accountability is a key piece when we're actually talking about hiring and retaining a high quality law enforcement force, because as the council member mentioned, morale is an issue. And I think by having a police department that has well-known and publicized challenges within its culture, that doesn't do well to also retain positive, good officers that can appropriately serve our communities. And so I've been really committed to making sure that we can have a truly accountable police force as well. And also, to be clear, I do support a number of these hiring measures, and I've been more dedicated to also thinking about how do we reach those.
Thank you.
So I just clarification, the union contract that we voted on, how we vote with union bargaining is dictated by the state. And so we, for the contract, voted for retroactive pay and competitive wage increases, as well as civilization of the police force. Going forward, we're still negotiating, which will be the accountability part. I agree, we need accountability, we need a culture change, and that is what we're going to be talking about forthcoming in the second part of this contract.
I'd like to double back on something that we talked about as it relates to youth crime. Alexis, you've talked about a safety plan that focuses on intervention and diversion programs. Some of these ideas are already in place. What would you introduce that is new to the equation?
I think we also need to be clear that for many of our young people in our communities, they're also struggling with housing, also struggling with having their other basic needs met, and being able to just have a good life in the city as well. And so that is why I've been such a strong proponent for increasing our investments into our communities, including so we can make sure that all of our kiddos and young people in this community are housing secure, are able to get food and their basic needs met. And so making sure that we're increasing our investments in exactly those areas, while also increasing investments into those prevention organizations who are doing the good work, and while also making sure that we iterate upon and explore new options and new kinds of investments.
Okay. Councilmember Woo.
Could you repeat the question?
The question is, there's been talk about introducing intervention programs, diversion programs for youth. How would you, what new element would you introduce to that equation?
Yes, I believe we need to do more. I supported fully funding the $20 million for youth mental health. I also believe the community is doing such amazing things. And in a couple of weeks, I'm announcing a citywide initiative during the budget process to fund community de-escalation teams, very similar to what Community Watch does, where we empower community and neighbors and young people to be able to go to the person who is sleeping in the tent down from their street next to their house. How do we do that outreach and engagement ourselves to get people connected to resources? I do truly believe that it's going to take all of us, to solve or help get us closer to solving this problem. We cannot completely solve homelessness, but we could try.
Okay, we're going to move on to crime and disorder hotspots, and this includes an audience question here. Little Saigon, years ago dubbed the neighborhood that government forgot. Last year, the city put up signs to deter illegal street vending, clear sidewalks near 12th and Jackson. An audience member submitting this question asking, what more can the city do to help this area and the whole CID be more walkable and livable and have a voice again? And Tanya, we'll start with you.
Yes. So I remember how Little Saigon used to look like 4 years ago. It was a thriving area where people came from all over the city to shop at its stores, to grocery shop, as well as to walk around safely. And you look at it now, it's changed so much. And so my goal is to get it back to how it used to look 4 years ago. And that involves a multitude of things. At the beginning of the year, in January, the Navigation Center will leave. I'm watching closely on the transition of Navigation Center and its move, as well as something I'm fighting for the next couple of weeks in the budget process is how do we get safety ambassadors out to these areas? Because I believe 12th and Jackson and 3rd Pike and Pine are connected. We can't address one area without addressing the other. So I'll be fighting for that, as well as I know the Little Saigon community is putting together safety initiatives and plans that they would like carried out. And so working very closely with the community there, I think it's going to be of paramount importance. Also,
Okay, I think time's just about up.
Thank you.
Alexis, what do you say?
Absolutely. I think a focused activation is really needed, but again, needing the resources to be able to do so is also of paramount importance. And I'd be remiss to say if we didn't also talk about the city's looming budget deficit of over $260 million. And so making sure that we are clear that our city is also struggling to be able to fund our basic city services. And so in order to do the kind of focused activation work that I think truly is needed, and we can all agree, we want to be able to address the issues that we see in hotspot areas, making sure that we have the resources to be able to do so. I think a number of the measures that we would need to bring forward should be developed in partnership with community. I'm mindful of the number of community members that are running businesses and focused in a part of the streets. And so crafting those activations alongside them to make sure we have a good felt presence and we're able to do the work together.
We're going to move on to an issue that the city has declared a public health crisis, city and county. Fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. And in 2023, more than 1,067 people died from fentanyl poisonings and overdoses. What is the best tool the city can offer to combat this epidemic? Alexis, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. This issue is so important to me, just given the way I've seen it have impact in my community and my family and so on. And so making sure that we are increasing our funding and making treatment readily accessible. From the work that I've done in communities and across encampments, I've learned firsthand about the challenges that exist when it comes to accessing treatment when folks are ready to get onto that path. And so implementing things such as mobile medical treatment and having a clear comprehensive strategy with our county partners and the state to make sure we're scaling those resources, while also making things like overdose prevention, medication widely accessible so we can make sure we're keeping community members alive.
Thank you, Tanya.
So based on my experience at 12th and Jackson, I've been out there every week for the last 4 years. I've done Narcan on people, I've done CPR on people, and when I close my eyes at night, I see the eyes of the people I have not saved. I've been on my hands and knees, surrounded by needles, trying to resuscitate people, and it's devastating what fentanyl has done. And so a lot of the people I meet who are on fentanyl display a sense of hopelessness. And so I think it's about making sure we have safety teams, ambassadors, people from community, developing that trust and that connection. Why everyone turns to fentanyl and turns to addiction is different, and how do we address these root causes? By building trust, by going out there, having social workers there, and when people are ready to move on, that Suboxone, buprenorphine is available, and the resources are available to house them, as well as the wraparound services.
Thank you. And as a follow-up, an audience member wants to know if you have specific strategies that the city should implement to combat youth addiction. Tanya, we'll start with you.
Yes, I think it's all about partnerships with public-private groups, community centers, schools especially. There's a lot of things that are happening that a lot of community groups are doing to combat youth fentanyl use. At 12th and Jackson, which happens to be right next to Summit Sierra School, I see students coming in and out. I also have stand on 12th and Jackson and seen kids holding skateboards and basketballs walk up from Sound Transit and are able to buy drugs readily. So things like soda orders that stop people from selling drugs in these areas, not making it readily available so people are able to find it easily, as well as areas in front of schools where these zones are happening. How do we make sure our schools are safe and kids are able to go in and out in a healthy environment?
Thank you. Alexis?
Right. My opponent just mentioned that soda would stop people from selling drugs. And I just want to be very clear that we're setting a geographic limit in a city where folks can easily just move a couple blocks over outside of the soda zone. So I just want to be very clear about that claim. But when it comes to really combating youth addiction, we also need to really be focused on the fact, like, why are our youth using drugs? And in many cases for folks, they're struggling with other life circumstances, other kinds of instability in their lives. So really doing that in-reach and connecting across the board is tremendously important. And there are great organizations in our community that need resources and have been clear on the kind of strategies we should be implementing and funding to be able to do so and truly help our youth.
Thank you. And one last drug question. Last year, the City Council passed its measure bringing the city in line with the state law, making drug possession and public use a gross misdemeanor. An audience member wants to know, do you think this move was effective and should arresting for drug use continue? Tanya, you can go first.
Yes, really quickly. When we developed the soda zones, we did it based on data and data over a series of years. So we noticed that based on this data and talking to officers that a lot of these zones were picked because this is where the concentration of people went to sell and to buy. And so we looked at the data for that. When it comes to drug misdemeanor, I supported that bill. And we have to realize a lot of these initiatives can only do so much as we are staffed to do. I mean, our officers are understaffed, LEAD and all the other program like REACH were overwhelmed with people. There's no jail space. And so there wasn't much that we could do when it comes to drug ordinance, but it gave a tool for the total toolkit. And not every one of these is a magic potion that will relieve the issue, but all together, it's part of a piece of a large puzzle and comprehensive plan.
It's been nearly 10 years.
Oh, wait, no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have to let Alexis
I
respond.
apologize.
Alexis gets her chance.
My apologies.
Oh, well, the council member just said it. There's no jail space. So by increasing efforts to try and criminalize and get people inside, if we don't have the jail space, where are we going to go? And so when we're talking about also when we're just getting clear on getting to the root of the issue, putting people in jail doesn't help them recover. And I just want to be very, very clear about that measure. And so this would be something I'm really focused on, making sure that we are getting to the root of the issue and helping people in their recovery. And that means investing in people again, investing in the housing our community desperately needs, investing in easily accessible treatment options for folks, and investing also in a stellar frontline workforce that does the work in walking alongside folks in their path to recovery and stabilization.
My apologies for the interruption. Alexis, you mentioned stability, instability. It's been nearly 10 years since the city of Seattle declared homelessness a crisis. From A to F, what grade would you give the city council when it comes to how it's addressed the issue? And please explain your grade.
You know, because we have seen so many of our folks, hundreds of our community members die outside, it's hard not to say F, just for the simple fact of that. We continue to see so many of our community members die outside, folks who are actively continuing to be outside, living in tents, living in vehicles. I can commend and appreciate the steps that council and previous councils have taken to try and address the issue, but it hasn't been enough. And we need to get very, very real about the fact that lives are in the balance and investments need to be made into the housing crisis and all the supportive services to really make sure we're getting to the heart of this.
So not an F, but what grade would you assess? I mean, is it a passing grade? Is it?
No, it's a D.
Okay, all right.
Could you repeat the
Tanya, same
question? Oh, could you repeat the question?
Yes, from an A to an F, what grade would you give the city council when it comes to handling the issue of homelessness?
I think we're failing when it comes to the issue of homelessness. I mean, my opponent here wrote the 5-year plan for the King County Regional Homeless Authority, a plan that would have costed the city $12 billion. And we could all agree that this organization has not produced any meaningful result. Our point in time homeless count is the highest ever. Our city puts in about $130 million to the King County Regional Homeless Authority. And I believe we need a regional approach, but we need to reform and change it and work on the implementation. And so basically, I think that's one of the biggest differences in terms of experience is, my opponent was part of a failed organization. And I have on the ground experience providing aid to our unhoused neighbors. And so the big question is, who would you want running the city?
So how should the city, Alexis,
Would love
you
to
were-
rebut to that.
yes, go ahead.
If the council member had read the plan, she would know that the plan doesn't cost $12 billion. In fact, we put together a problem statement because homelessness is a housing issue. And so in order to fully address it, we need to be building the housing that our community desperately needs. And that is why there's a $12 billion figure in there, because developing housing, especially in this city, is tremendously expensive. Everything within the 5-year plan can be done within the existing budget.
And we will be addressing the issue of of housing in just a moment. But we need to keep this moving. So quick question for you both. Tanya, how should the city of Seattle handle encampments?
So I support the mayor's plan on encampment resolution and making sure that there is housing and shelter for every single person before an encampment resolution happens. I think we could, sweeps are not great. I think we need to rework the model, and I think it has to deal with making sure social workers are out there and building that trust, building that engagement before an encampment even develops. We see someone in a tent, we should be out there talking to people and trying to get them into housing, trying to get to them into resources. Many people I have met have been through a broken system. They've been through housing, through the many organizations that KCRJ funds, and have lost trust. And so for those groups of people who refuse shelter and housing, we need to develop that trust again to get them to come back inside. That takes these social workers and making sure they're doing the ongoing engagement outreach.
Thank you very much. Alexis.
Sweeps are tremendously traumatizing for many of the folks that are victims of them. We also know, as was mentioned, that we need to build trust in the system. Trust is built when you can rely on your social worker or the case manager that you're working alongside to show up, continue to show up. And the fact of the matter is many of our frontline staff are not paid wages where they are able to live and remain within the city and often leave these roles. And so we see tremendous turnover where I've talked to folks who have had 10 different case managers and they say, why should I trust you that you're going to get me into housing? That's where we see distrust happening. And we know models of encampment resolution that work. The state right-of-way initiative works. And it's important to note that this is a different kind of model that builds trust over the course of a month, but also provides a housing resource.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk about housing a little more here and rent control. Housing prices going up, so does rent. City numbers show a 69% increase from 2010 to 2018. So rent control measures had been voted down in the past. We want to know, and some of our audience have asked this as well, what can the council do to make housing more affordable, not just for owners, but for renters as well? Alexis, we'll start with you.
Yes, well, as a renter myself, I feel this one deeply. With that, I think in many ways we're all feeling it, whether you are a renter or a senior on a fixed income or a young family trying to buy your first house. We don't have the supply to currently meet the need of housing in our community. So we need to be building housing in every neighborhood across our city, while also taking into account that the history of housing development in this city has really concentrated a lot of that housing development in South Seattle, namely in communities of color, and that has fueled displacement. So being able to fully address both our need for our housing supply while also making sure that we're mitigating displacement, we need to invest in affordable home ownership programs, community land trust models, and affordable housing across the board.
Okay. Tanya?
Yes, we live in one of the most rent-burdened cities. The average rent is anywhere from $1,800 to $2,500 a month, and people commute hours to get to Seattle, to work in Seattle. The biggest difference between myself and my opponent is that I have built housing. I've built workforce housing where we only charge our tenants a percentage of their income, so no one's forced to pay a rent they cannot afford. And I believe that model works, and there's a long waiting list. And that's something I'm working on, is legislation on how do we build more housing for the entire city, more housing of all types, and save trees at the same time. This is not an either or debate. It's and, yes, and. And so basically, I love what a lot of community groups are doing with Land Trust, Africa Town. Brighton neighborhood has a co-op model where neighbors are actually able to purchase parts of the block.
Time. Thanks.
We're going to stick with housing and get a little wonkier here for a second. You've both said in campaign materials that you want to address housing through zoning and the comprehensive plan. How does the city's current housing proposal fall short, and what would you do to increase housing in the city? Tanya, you go first.
Yes, the mayor's plan will actually drop after budget, but looking at the rough draft of a plan, we need to definitely build more. And we also need to make sure that it's equitable by looking at the gentrification and displacement plan as well. I've heard that that was taken out, and I'm fighting to get that put back in. Coming from a community that's known as the most endangered neighborhood in America, fighting gentrification and displacement is really important, and that's something I plan to do going forward. At the same time, being able to build housing and especially workforce housing, affordable housing, which is what is most needed throughout the entire city in our transit zones. And so I've been to all the land use, comprehensive plan meetings and listened to people and what their suggestions are. And then now we have to look at how we implement it.
Thanks.
And Alexis?
Wonderful. Right. The comprehensive plan in its draft form has not gone far enough to plan for the amount of density that we need across the city to accommodate for all of our new neighbors. And I think we should be also excited about a lot of our new neighbors. Folks are coming to Seattle because they love the city just the same way that we all do. And so making sure we have a comprehensive plan that has planning for the housing that we need. I really align with what the Complete Communities Coalition has put forward, accounting for having more neighborhood centers in our communities, more transit-oriented development, but also a meaningful anti-displacement strategy, which definitely was missing from the previous plan. And as in my work with communities that are working on anti-displacement, we also need to be clear that this will require resources, but that is a worthy investment we need to prioritize.
As a 20-second follow-up for both of you, where should the city be building housing? Where should the housing go? Alexis, you go first.
Absolutely. And communities that historically have not had the density that communities of color have brought in. So making sure that we are building more housing and increasing density in northern parts of Seattle across communities, again, that have been primarily zoned for single-family housing.
Thank you. And Tanya?
Everywhere, and every neighborhood is different, because what needed in Delridge is different in the historic district of Ballard or the Chinatown International District or in the Central District. Is how do we meaningfully build with community input based on that neighborhood? I believe every neighborhood is different, and we really need to listen and be able to overall build more.
Well, you say every neighborhood is different, so let's hone in on one specifically, the Rainier Valley. Tanya, what are some of the big issues facing that community, in your opinion? And this is specifically coming from an audience member. How would you improve the quality of life?
Yes, I think some of the bigger things that are happening there is traffic safety. Rainier Avenue has not been, it's a really deadly street. And so how do we look at traffic calming measures through the built environment? I think is going to be important. More lighting. Also, looking at safety, public safety, basically, is what I hear the most, knocking on thousands of doors this past year. People don't feel safe in their neighborhoods. They don't feel safe going to the grocery store. And so how do we build back up that trust and that perception of safety? And that includes a whole host of different measures. Another thing I'm hearing about is people are concerned about encampments, about tenting. I believe it's inhumane to allow someone to die in a tent, and many communities have very similar concerns. So how are we doing that outreach?
And that's time. Thank you very much. Alexis, your response, Rainier Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that we have dangerous arterials, pardon me, that we have seen folks who have lost their lives on. So being able to address street safety is tremendously important. Also including in there the need to be building in some bike infrastructure as well, as we do see unsafety for bicyclists. So really building on like how are we improving our street safety, but then also addressing the tremendous housing needs. We need to be improving affordability, but also creating more avenues for home ownership opportunity, while also keeping a clear eye on keeping healthy housing too, making sure that we are addressing the infrastructure needs and making sure that people who are renting within Rainier Valley are in healthy housing. And lastly, community safety. Of course, we have seen too much gun violence this year.
All right, let's talk about the budget, and it's not a pretty picture, as you both likely know here. The city's facing a huge budget hole of $260 million. The mayor asking agencies what it would look like to cut 20% from their budget. So the question to you would be, are there agencies you believe should get less, and what would you cut first? Alexis, we'll start with you.
Well, as the only person on this stage that has worked extensively in large public budgets, namely with the University of Washington, which has a $10 billion budget, I'm fairly experienced in working on balancing departmental needs, academic unit priorities to make sure that we are putting forward and having an accurately represented budget. And so what I bring to the table in this discussion is making sure that as we are addressing budget challenges in future years, I don't think the election of this position would allow me to vote on a budget, but to that end, making sure that we are improving fiscal health for the city, making sure that we are maintaining fiscal health so we can have strong bond ratings while also being clear-eyed about the need for additional public resources.
Just want to follow up here. Are there agencies, though, that you believe should get less funding? Are there agencies that should be cut?
Sorry, I lost part of that question.
Okay.
I just would say, yeah, specifically, I mean, as a budget professional, you know, I only have as much working knowledge about the current workings of the budget as the public does. I know that council has much more insight into that, and I'd be bringing a lot of thorough questions to really consider and evaluate the options alongside departments and with community to figure out what we should be informing our cuts based on.
Okay. Tanya?
Yes, so my opponent is absolutely correct. She's the only one who has dealt with large public budgets. I've dealt with large private budgets. Building, of course, housing is a large budget, as well as a small business owner having to deal with budgets. We can't always ask for additional funding when trying to balance our budgets, and budgets are really tight, not just for small businesses, but also for people trying to get food on the table. And so my approach to this budget, when you ask like what should be cut, my approach is, as a small business owner, I want to know everything. And the mayor hands down his budget next week. And as city council, we are the oversight. We will definitely be looking in details and taking 2 months to really look closely at all the fine details and looking at the city departments. And keeping our essential services is of paramount importance. We experience high inflation, and this is a table that has been set for us. A lot of the issues we're seeing is from previous city councils.
Okay.
And so how do we
I do want to ask you both a couple of follow-up questions here, and you're just going to get 20 seconds, but how would you balance a budget? Would you begin by cutting programs or try to raise new revenue? Tanya, go ahead and go first.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, how I approach the budget is as a small business owner's perspective. Asking for more taxes should be a last resort, not the first resort. We need long-term solutions, not short-term fixes. And so how I approach this budget is, you know, as I said, keeping essential services and making sure that the affordability is there, especially for people. We just passed the housing levy, now the transportation plan. Next year, it's libraries. And so we also have SBU rates going up, as well as Seattle City rates going up. So how do we make sure that, you know, these dollars add up for people, and how do we keep it as low as possible?
Okay.
And so,
and let me get to Alexis on this. Would you cut programs, or would you try to raise new revenue?
I think we need to try and raise new revenue, especially given the fact that, and I want to be clear also about what kind of revenue. I'm talking about progressive revenue and making sure that corporations and the ultra wealthy that live in this community are paying what they owe. The biggest thing I'm hearing from community right now is the need and desire for increased investment in our young people, in treatment options and housing. So making sure we're representing exactly that. We need to be increasing our investments in those areas and making sure that corporations are paying their fair share is a key part of that.
Okay, one more follow-up question. I believe we're going to go 20 seconds each here, so these are quick. One audience member wants to know, how would you lower taxes? Is there any way to provide relief for people right now who feel overburdened in the city? Alexis?
Absolutely. It's important to note that Washington State has a upside down tax code. Our lower income community members are paying disproportionately more in taxes into the system. So being able to take steps to remedy that is tremendously important. Making sure that we are addressing and really looking at progressive revenue options instead first, and while looking at how we can reduce our reliance on things like sales tax and property tax to fund our city services.
Okay. And Tanya, 20 seconds.
I really want to address something earlier that was said. So a lot of our progressive revenue options are limited by the state. The Progressive Task Force identified 12, 10 were illegal. And so I'm willing to go before the state legislature to advocate for progressive taxes, but especially for our schools. I went to TOPS school last night to talk to many of the parents fighting to keep their schools open. And yes, we need to really prioritize children.
Okay.
Tanya, you mentioned the transportation levy, the vote that's coming up this November. It's a $1.55 billion plan, would cost the average Seattle homeowner about $500 a year. The levy lists a lot of specific projects, and it also gives the council and transportation officials flexibility when it comes to determining how that money is spent. What are your top priorities if you had to rank them? What would be your top 3 priorities in terms of using the money to address concerns about the city?
Well, I think my top would be the one that's hardest is Vision Zero. How do we get our traffic deaths down to 0? And it's going to take a very comprehensive approach. My second one would be building out more sidewalks. How do we make it accessible? There is a list of missing sidewalks, not only in District 2, but also District 5, and it's an equity issue. How do we make sure that it's safe for people to travel, to walk to schools, to get to their transit center? And also, we have a lot of aging infrastructure, a lot of disrepair when it comes to our bridges and our roads. That could be quite dangerous. And so I think, we need to prioritize things that deal with life safety, most importantly. Also, looking at the built environment, especially on Aurora Avenue North, I think it's all connected to public safety. And so how we address one thing ripples to other things as well.
Thank you. Alexis.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that we work alongside and also determining where should our first investment areas be in the transportation levy. I do agree that we should be increasing our investment to make sure that we are prioritizing street safety. It's unacceptable that we have seen the number of traffic deaths that we have, but also investing in increasing our public transportation options. So we have a public transit system that encourages people getting into buses, getting in on their bikes, and making sure that we have a system that is accessible and connected to the city and also really safe.
All right. The new levy raises money through property taxes, but some academics argue most of those taxes will eventually be passed on to renters in the form of rent increases. Are property taxes the best way to fund government services? Alexis, we'll start with you.
As stated before, because of the Washington State Constitution and the limited options, not being able to impose a income tax, that does give municipalities limited options on how we can pursue and fund our city services. Property tax is one of the options that we have, but we have so many of them to fund our city services because of the limitations that we have. I do stand by and think that we should be creating more parity in our state, a more fair tax system, to make sure that we're funding our city services, which is why I've been such a strong proponent for progressive revenue. I keep mentioning that Washington State is the second most regressive tax code. The only state with a more regressive tax code is Florida, and Washington is not Florida. We are not Florida in policy and how we invest in our values. And so standing by and making sure that we have corporations pay what they owe.
Tanya, your response.
Yes, I knocked on doors throughout the city and talked to a lot of seniors who come to the door. They don't know how they're going to pay their property taxes. It goes up every year. And plus all the requirements to turn to green energy, going from gas to electric, all these costs are adding up and many people on fixed income can't pay it. And so I think a lot of it, we'll have to look at how do we make sure that people are aware of city resources? There are tax, exemption or rebate programs within the city, and how do we make sure our seniors, people who do not speak English, have access to the resources? Most of the resources are set for people who make between 70 to 80% AMI, people who are on fixed income. And I do a lot of, educating and promoting of these resources when I talk to people at the doors. But yes, that is a huge concern.
Okay,
and
that
I
is
think
time. Thank you.
Great. And one quick transit question for you. Would you support building the First Avenue streetcar to connect the South Lake Union and First Hill lines? I believe, Tanya, you go first.
Yes, I would support it, but finding the funding is the most difficult thing. So I think it would depend on the funding source. But yes, I think having more transit options would be amazing.
Great. Sorry, it was a full-end question. You'd have 30 more seconds to talk about transit if you would like.
Oh,
Apologies.
yes. Okay, no problem. So yes, we need more transit options. I'm so excited to see that now ST1 goes all the way to Linwood. I'm excited to see ST3 going, so we have more than line 1 currently. I also think we also need to look at metro buses and all other options, a streetcar. It's part of our healthy ecosystem and we could do better. I hear a lot of people, a lot of closures. People want more transit, so let's do it.
Terrific, thank you. And Alexis?
I love that I get so much time to talk about transit. I don't own a car, so I truly rely on our having a strong bus infrastructure, making sure that we also are investing to make sure we have alternative modes of transportation, making sure that we have safe bike lanes, but also, again, really excited to see the opening of the Linwood station for light rail. I know that's changed a lot of folks' commutes, which is tremendously exciting. To answer the initial question, though, related to the streetcar, yes, absolutely. I wish it happened yesterday, and making sure that we can invest to make it happen. But with that, I'm also excited when we think about the future of transit in this city. Right now, vehicle emissions are the #1 source of emissions in our city. So anything that we can be doing to invest in this way to get people out of their cars and into our buses is a priority to me.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about small business real quickly here. Many, as you know, many small businesses are still struggling. COVID-19 pandemic, business losses. It's a city that's increasingly expensive to operate in, not just live in. So audience members want to ask you what the council can do to help them. And Alexis, let's go with you first.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Well, just the small businesses are struggling out there. There's a lot of red tape they have to go to. It's increasingly expensive to operate in. So audience wants to know, if you're a city council member, what can you do to help small business?
Absolutely. I've been doing canvases of neighborhoods across the city, just walking in and saying hi to our small businesses and trying to connect and understand what are the challenges in running a small business right now in the city. And there are a number. There are a number of businesses, particularly immigrant-owned businesses, that are running at very thin margins. And any kind of major changes could mean to them going under. And of course, they hold a number of paramount cultural importance to so many communities in this city. So I really would explore ways that the Office of Economic Development can take steps to lower the cost for a number of these businesses to do their business. So looking at things like commercial rent stabilization and other kinds of programs, grant programs, to make sure that we can keep a number of these businesses open while also not compromising on workers' wages.
And Tanya?
I am a small business owner. My family owns a neighborhood restaurant in the heart of the Chinatown International District, and we recognize it's tough. We know 6 restaurants that are going to close at the end of the year. They're for sale right now within a block radius of us. And so businesses are really struggling. And I think a big part of that is public safety. Broken windows, break-ins, having our employees coming in with bloody noses is a lot. And so I think looking at public safety would be a helpful factor. The cost of doing business is getting too high. Another important factor looks into people building more businesses, entrepreneurships. How do we fill up our empty storefronts with a very similar program we did a few years ago with the empty storefront program, getting people into these spaces, and also helping with making their permits faster so they could do their tenant improvements and be able to open up quickly. It took 1 year to 2 years to get permits.
Thank you.
Let's talk success. Given that the winning candidate will have to run again in 2025, what does a successful term look like for you? I forget who goes first. I believe, Tanya, you go first.
Yeah, so I'm doing the exact same thing right now. I'm 8 months in, having to run a campaign, and it is quite a learning curve. Like learning the different processes of city government and building and collaborating with all the council members. I'm proudly endorsed by all council members except for one, and we are all in person chatting about different ideas and legislation that we want to work on. And so based on my experience with building housing, my experience in a small business, running a community public safety group, these are all things that I'm working on. I'm looking at legislation that will allow us to be able to build more housing based on my experiences. I'm looking at initiatives that will empower communities into helping their public safety. Also looking at initiatives where, we're helping our small businesses and we're saving
Okay,
trees.
that's time. Thank you. Alexis?
When I think about a successful term, I think about getting things done. And that is something that, unfortunately, this council has struggled to do in its 8 months while in office. This is a council that has voted down affordable housing legislation, that has approved a SPOG contract without increased accountability measures, that just voted to re-implement banishment policy that historically has not worked, has also added funding to the budget deficit. And what I'm able to offer in this moment is my experience having brought people together across the ideological spectrum to solve problems. I'm interested in making sure that we address and put forward common sense legislation that addresses the core issues of affordability and safety in our communities. That is what Seattleites want.
Okay, let's talk sports. Oh, you had a rebuttal?
Yes.
Tanya's 20 seconds.
So I think this is the biggest difference, is that my opponent advocates for all the policies in the last 4 years that have brought us to where we are today. And so we have to move forward. We have to look at how we could public safety and do that differently from what we've done in the past. I always talk about Little Saigon and how it looked 4 years ago and how it looked today. And those are all the years of failed policy that has affected our marginalized and most vulnerable communities the most. And that's my goal in this council, is to help bring that community back.
Thank you. That's good. Alexis, 20 seconds rebuttal.
Absolutely. I think what's important to note is, I would say that I'm interested in solving problems. I have a track record of being able to address and bring people together around a table, while my opponent is characterizing me in a way that I have definitely not brought forward on the campaign. Our campaign has been the one uniting our communities, not bringing angry people to City Hall to give public comment for hours and hours at a time just to be unheard.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to hit the lightning round now, and I believe you two have paddles up there with yes or no. You can use those, or some of these questions will require a little bit of an answer, just 1 or 2 words. And this is kind of a fun little round here. So we're going to start with, what is your favorite Seattle spot, not famous with tourists, kind of a hidden gem? Tanya.
I love the Fremont Troll, but I think that's debatable, whether it's famous to tourists or not. It's kind of off the beaten track. And I love how weird and different the troll is.
Okay, Alexis?
There's a little stairwell in the Montlake area, a little random set of stairs that is a part of my run. It's my favorite part of the run. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, it kind of leads up to Roanoke. It is this gorgeous little green canopy, and that's my favorite part of my morning run.
Yes or no, will the Seahawks win the Super Bowl within the next 5 years?
Yes.
Yes. I think there's only one right answer to that.
Will the Mariners win the World Series in the next 20 years?
Oh, gosh, yes. I have
Optimistic.
faith.
Okay.
And we will get the Sonics back.
Yes.
Quick answers. Where do you feel safest in Seattle? Tanya, we'll start with you.
Oh, with my family. I don't think there is a particular location, but I know I feel safe when I have the people I love around me. And I define safety as mental, physical safefty.
Okay, thank you, Alexis.
My favorite cafe, Boon Boona, on 12th and East Cherry.
You can only choose one: Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, or Soundgarden.
Oh,
Soundgarden.
Nirvana.
Nirvana? You got the answer right, Tanya. It is Nirvana.
Okay.
All right. Now it's time for our closing statements. You'll have 60 seconds. And Tanya, you go first.
So we need leaders who are willing to be realistic about on-the-ground approaches and not double down on the failed approaches that have led us to where we are today. We have to move forward. We live in a world-class city and we deserve world-class services. We've come a long way, but we still have so much more to go. As a council member, my priorities include public safety, affordability, and making sure that King County Regional Homeless Authority is on the right track. We cannot allow our past mistakes to dictate our future. So my work speaks for itself. And I believe the city is in a better place than how it was when I started 8 years ago, but we cannot afford to let go of our progress that we're making. I am Councilmember Tanya Woo, and I ask for your vote to make Seattle affordable, compassionate, and a safe place to live.
And Alexis, you have 60 seconds.
Thank you again for the opportunity to be here tonight. As I hope you have heard, I bring experience and the ability to unify folks across the spectrum. I got my master's degree at the UW, and since then I've championed agreements with unanimous votes between 5 different city councils, uniting our North King County neighbors. I've led the development of a countywide 5-year plan to address homelessness. I established and directed our region's first sub-regional severe weather response system and protocols because climate change is here and now and requires us to act. And I've worked in UW's budget office, working across the university and medical system to balance priorities in a $10 billion budget. Division is everywhere, but this is the campaign that is uniting Seattle. This is the campaign that Planned Parenthood Trust will protect a woman's right to choose. This is the campaign that the Alliance for Gun Responsibility Trust will make our community safer. This is the campaign that unionized nurses, electricians, maritime workers, and machinists trust will fight for working families. And this is the campaign that united the entire Democratic Party organizations in Seattle because it is the campaign that will uphold core Democratic Party values.
Okay. We want to thank you so much for participating in tonight's debate. That's all the time we have. We'd like to thank our candidates, Tanya Woo, Alexis Rinck, and our colleagues here on the panel. Thank you for being with us. Have a great night.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Don't forget to log on www.rainieravenue.radio.world.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for this? This is Rainier Avenue Radio.world, the station that cares about our community.
Right here. Yeah.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not hearing men compare women to residential real estate, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Generational wealth. Generational wealth. Generational wealth. What is generational wealth? We asked our communities, and this is what they had to say.
Generational wealth to me is wealth that has been accumulated from their ancestors, but their ancestors are usually the ones that aren't the ones that built it, but built off of POC ancestors, in my own definition, from what I see. Because not many POC people have that type of wealth, as you can see in many people's neighborhoods and communities. It's usually a white person. You can see it in gentrification around us and even in schools nowadays. But generational wealth is basically hard work that isn't really your own hard work.
This campaign to create awareness to generational wealth is brought to you by the Department of Neighborhoods Generational Wealth Initiative, the Washington Housing Finance Commission, and Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not translating the lyrics of Boogie Oogie Oogie for bored Europeans, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Support for Rainier Avenue Radio comes from Demetrius Jazz Alley. Tonight is Seattle's born and bred trumpeter, singer Jermaine Smith. One night only on tour in support of his new release, Come On Home. Tuesday and Wednesday is the Headhunters' 50th anniversary and album release celebration, live from Brooklyn Bowl. Tickets and information on jazzalley.com.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not busy tearing the roof off the suckers, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Support for Rainier Avenue Radio comes from Cascade PBS, presenting season 2 of Out and Back with Allison Mariella Desir. Join Allison as she explores the Pacific Northwest with changemakers who are reclaiming space in the outdoors and creating opportunities for local BIPOC communities to engage with nature and find joy and healing. It's available now on Cascade PBS app and airing on KCTS 9 Thursdays at 8:50 p.m.
Closing the digital divide and ensuring that Washington State continues to be a national leader in the space of digital equity is a core mission of the Washington State Office of Equity. This is not an easy task in a state as diverse as ours, not only in size and topography, but also in demographics, including socioeconomic factors, as well as the natural divides of rural and urban access and infrastructure. It is the commitment of the Office of Equity to not only bring digital equity, but digital equality to ensure that young learners in the smallest cities in our state have the same equal footing as those in our most affluent neighborhoods. Our elders and veterans can access services like telehealth online, that high school students in our urban centers aren't forced to study in restaurant lobbies because they cannot access the web at home. Washington State Office. Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio and our presentation of the post-debate show. We did a pre-debate show and we had the debate. Now it is time to find out how candidates and the moderators feel about the performance. I don't even know if performance is the right word. Whatever you want to call it, we're here to talk about it right now. I want to go ahead and get started, and joining me is Alexis. Alexis, how you feeling?
Invigorated.
We're not going to talk for very long, but I just kind of want to get, how did it go? I know that's a big question. For you, how did it go? I'll ask a little more specific, but that overall thing, how did it go?
Yeah, you know, I love a good invigorating discussion on the policy issues. I do wish we had more than 45 seconds. My gosh, I don't think always 45 seconds lends itself to being able to fully communicate the complexity of an issue. But I do think we had some really good discussions, or you know, there was very clear contrast brought between my opponent and I think it was good for the public to see that.
Are there things that you would like to, I just want to say, drive home that are major differences between you and your opponent? And if not, fine. But this is the opportunity. We just had the debate. I heard some differences. Matter of fact, I heard a little contentiousness in some areas. Are there things that you want to share with our audience now that you have more than 45 seconds to say these are areas where you should just know that we're different? I'm not saying who's right or wrong, but folks have to make a decision about who they're going to vote for.
I appreciate that. You know, I think what I offer to this is a lot more realism to the situation that we're in. We are talking about the need to address some real community needs that require investment. As folks probably heard, I talked pretty extensively about the need for progressive revenue, about the need to making sure that we are having corporations and the ultra wealthy pay into our system so we're able to fully serve our community. And I bring that realism as somebody who's actually worked in public finance, has worked in large public budgets, and really, I have a vested interest also in making sure that we have solid fiscal health for the city. But I do think with what our communities are seeing, what we also know what is true in the data, our communities need investment now if we're actually going to get to the root of the issues. And while my opponent may say that she supports those services and programs, we lack the funding to be able to really scale them to the extent that's really needed. And so what I also offer to this, beyond having worked in budgets, is somebody who's worked across communities really in solving problems. And so that's a bit about, you know, the experience that I bring to this, but really just a grounded realism about, you know, if we're going to see the results that our public is asking us to deliver upon, we need to see investment.
Okay, and I'm going to ask candidate Woo the same question. 45 seconds was not a lot of time. And there wasn't a lot of time allotted to say, oh, I want to speak up on this some more. I heard homelessness, affordable housing, $12 million. There was a disagreement there. Can you explain to our audience, maybe a little bit more in depth, what was taking place there and why you felt that you had to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. Councilmember Wu inaccurately said that there was a 5-year plan that would cost $12 billion that KCRHA was asking for. That is not true. That plan was not about asking for more money, but rather that was a plan that, one, was meant to outline the problems facing our system. And one of the key parts of that was using the best data that we had available on the state level, statewide modeling that was actually being used and is being used by cities around our state to inform the comprehensive plans that all cities are required to deliver upon. Using that modeling data to project how much would it cost to address the housing crisis, build the housing we need, and laid out a number of the kinds of housing we really need based on our current population experiencing homelessness. So it was more so a data point to say, this is how much it really costs to get to the bottom of this. But the plan itself is informed by it has about 70 different initiatives actually formed by frontline service providers who are doing the work, informed by people with lived experience, and informed by cities that are also engaging in this work across our county. And also sets forward a number of ways that we have our system partners that are also a part of addressing our homelessness crisis. I'm thinking about the foster care system, the school system, our healthcare system, behavioral health system, jail system. They're partners in this too. We can't do it alone. And so I really felt the need to clarify that point because we know that KCRHA, the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, is a part of addressing homelessness. And this was the first plan for the agency. We know that it has undergone and has been through a lot. I hold hope that there is success there because there is a new leader at the agency who just started in the past month or so. And I want to do the work to make sure that entity is successful. But I also want to stop the spread of misinformation and make sure that we are doing the hard work to really put the issues on the table, come around and say, how are we going to solve homelessness together? That 5-year plan got unanimous votes through 2 boards, including an approval vote from the mayor and county executive. They agreed, along with also a number of other cities, that this is the path we need to be going down towards. So this is something that a lot of work and a lot of community work went into. And I would still say that this is the plan that really needs to be executed on if we're to make progress.
Okay, we're going to have a chance to talk to a couple moderators too. Again, you're listening to the Post-Debate Show. It's me, Tony B, right here on Rainier Avenue Radio. Of course, my guest right now is candidate Alexis Rinck. Another thing that you mentioned that was important to you was public transportation. I didn't hear this brought up. I want to get your feedback here on this thing called light rail and the impact on the CID, the Chinatown International District. There are different viewpoints on what this should look like, and I'm taking it you know what I'm talking about. Now, this doesn't just impact the CID, although it definitely impacts the CID. But in regards to public transport, did you have a viewpoint on where you think this new light rail station should be, or that whole situation there, that ultimately at the end of the day, if you're not aware of this, the light rail going through Chinatown International District could be at a few different places. I'm not going to go into detail, but I want to get your opinion on, because you mentioned public transportation.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure community is really driving the conversation, especially when we're talking about businesses that would be most directly impacted by the placement of some of those stations. And so at this point, I want to make sure that we have a light rail system that is serving the CID in the area, and we're doing everything that we can to mitigate impacts. So whether it's north, south, or 4th Ave, I really want community partners, again, who are going to be the most impacted by that development, to be driving the conversation.
All right. Last thing that I want to mention to you specifically, your favorite place in Seattle. What did you think about that whole lightning round, thing? Did you think that was a waste of time? It was supposed to be fun. I don't know. Maybe it was cute, and you don't have to worry about offending anybody. Or maybe so.
Is that what you think?
I don't know. I personally would have just thought that time could have been used to address something more specific to our communities. But hey, your thoughts on that?
you know, I think there's value and space for fun questions.
Mhm.
I'm a person too who enjoys the city.
Mhm.
So it was nice to actually talk about, you know, one of my favorite places. It was kind of nice. And I was surprised by what immediately came to mind. I actually wanted some more time to think about it. But I think, you know, there's some value in humanizing candidates a little bit. I'm just a community member too who decided to do this big crazy thing and want to represent the city. So I think there's space for it. I wish they asked about food though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The post-debate show is not going to be as long as the pre-debate show. Uh, Overall, my final question to you, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to again speak to those who will be making decisions. Your vote is your own vote. And what we're trying to do here is give you information so that you can become a more informed voter and hear from the candidates and see if there are issues that align with things that are important to you. Um, Alexis, I'm going back to the issue of this is an at-large position that represents the entire city of Seattle. And this may be uncomfortable, but I'm not running for office, you are. Do you think that our moderators did a good job of making sure that this at-large position, that there were questions asked that gave you the opportunity to express whatever it is that you feel would make you the candidate for this citywide at-large position? Did you get to do that? Did you get to make that case?
Yeah, you know, I wish we got a little bit more into some of the neighborhood specific things, truthfully. You know, I think where we also are seeing, you know, I would have loved an opportunity to talk about, you know, our West Seattleites and talk about the challenges they face in our community, to talk about, you know, folks who live along Lake City Way, to talk about, you know, our connections even out to Ballard and, you know, the challenges Ballardites face. So I think, you know, the moderators did a great job in presenting a slate of topics before us, but I would have loved to see additional neighborhoods, you know, discussed and talked about, because one of the greatest joys in running for office so far has been this opportunity I've had to be out in so many different communities and hear not just the similarities, but also the differences. And thinking about how I would partner also with each of the district specific council members in trying to resolve the challenges that we are seeing on the ground level.
Thank you for joining me, Alexis. I appreciate your time. Thank you for running for office. I would have liked to hear more. That's why it's just my personal opinion. I thought that whole lightning round stuff was a waste of time when I could have heard things more specific to our communities. That's just my opinion. But I think you answered the question in the way you want to. I appreciate you joining us. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much again for the opportunity, and have a good night.
Okay. All right. This again is the post-debate show. It is me, Tony B. I am your host. You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio. The debate just happened. Now we're getting immediate response. Who do we have coming up next? So someone's going to be sitting here in the seat, and we're going
Someone's
to get
coming.
immediate.
Yes. Sorry to keep you
well,
waiting. Tony
well.
B. Yes.
Angela King, how are you?
I am wonderful, in your presence especially. Good to see you. Good to be here
see
tonight.
you too. How are things going over at KUOW?
Things are going great. Things are heating up. Election is 48 days away. The countdown is on. So it is a big time for the folks at KUOW to make sure we serve our communities, make sure people are informed with the facts, keep that opinion out, because that's for the voters to issue their opinions. It is our job to provide the facts. So.
Well, you had what I consider to be a very important role here. You're a moderator. In the presidential debates, the moderators came under fire. And I think that people are more aware now that there is an impact potentially that the moderators can have. Why was this important to you to moderate this particular candidacy for Seattle City Council position number 8?
It's important to be part of the solution. I may not be someone who's bold enough to run. I am a voter. It is important for me to vote. But there's a special responsibility as a journalist. Like you say, a lot of the journalists came under fire for
was it ABC, CNN, the different debates, fact checking, what is your role? And it's important to get the conversation going, to talk to these candidates on just a general level that is non-rehearsed, that is conversational. I mean, we had the clock on them. So a lot of things had to be condensed into quick answers. But as a member of this community, I need to play a role in what shapes it. And it's not, like I say, to weigh or to levy my opinion on something, but to be a facilitator. And in any way that I can serve our communities that way, especially in such a pivotal election year. It's not time to be on the sidelines. Find a way to engage. And I've just been fortunate enough to serve this role and be in this capacity and serve as someone who could ask the questions that people don't necessarily get the opportunity to do directly just because we're busy, people are moving. So here's a chance where we can all sit down, take a minute, and really engage together on some critical topics.
So you knew beforehand that they had 45 seconds.
Yes.
To answer the questions. How were you thinking in terms of phrasing your questions so that 45 seconds could be used effectively by the candidates to share information that was going to be relevant and valuable to those who are listening, who are trying to make a decision out there?
Yeah, it's hard, and it's a craft that I am still learning. You want to provide context, but you also want to bring the questions down to a basic level. You get too wonky, people tune out. For example, we asked the question about homelessness. One way that people can relate is everybody's been graded at some point in their life. So to break it down on that level, grade the city. Tell me how the city's doing. You can give me opinions left and right, but if you can pin down a common denominator that everyone can relate to, it's about bringing it down to a conversational level. So in asking the questions and in crafting some of the questions, because we all shared we shared some questions and we all discussed them, Josh and John, the other panelist. And so we had an idea of where we wanted to go with them. But in terms of phrasing, it's always important to me to provide some context, some substance, and then just ask the question like I would ask you.
You specifically brought up Rainier Valley. One of the things that I know that I would have liked to heard more of, especially for this at-large citywide position, were things specific to a variety of different neighborhoods. You brought up Rainier Valley. This is Rainier Avenue Radio. You know how we get down. That's who we represent. That's who we try to get voice to. A lot of times when people bring up Rainier Valley, it's to talk about all of the things that supposedly are wrong in our community and crime. And that is, like it or not, an image that people have. Why did you bring up Rainier Valley? Was there something in particular that you wanted to get to? What made you specifically say Rainier Valley?
We had talked about other communities. Other communities had come up, and there are just so many topics that needed to be discussed. I do appreciate the point that you mentioned that oftentimes when Rainier Valley comes up, it is seen negatively, or it is put in a frame that's like, oh, it's Rainier Valley. You need to watch your step or be careful. But what I wanted to get from the candidates was, I think there's always room for improvement. You could be on cloud 9, you could go to cloud 10. You can be at rock bottom and you can move up to the next stair level. So given the time constraint, I wish we could have gotten into more specific issues for that community. But it was important to, like we mentioned Little Saigon, we mentioned the CID, we mentioned North Seattle. It was just an opportunity to bring the Rainier Valley into the conversation specifically. There are just so many broad questions since this is an at-large position. But to ask about the Rainier Valley specifically, I should also mention too, it was a question that was offered to us by one of our KUOW listeners. And it was like I say, it was a way to bring up the community. I wish we had more time to specifically talk about some of the issues because the candidates talked about I think the main issue they addressed was traffic safety. It seemed to be the main topic there, and there's so much to go on. But yes, it's a fair point. I think that the valley should be given more opportunities to shine rather than being framed in a question to say, what's the problem? How do we fix it? So I accept that. I accept that point, and it's fair.
That scared me a little bit because when you mentioned Rainier Valley, anyway. But as far as we're concerned, you can always talk about Rainier Valley.
All right. Yes.
On Rainier Avenue Radio. You can't talk. If you're going to claim that we are the community that is the most diverse in the country, then we deserve to have more things said about Rainier Valley and the folks who live in Rainier Valley. That's just my opinion about it.
It's fair.
And so
It
I
is
brought
fair.
that up. Now I'm going to get in your Kool-Aid a little bit.
Oh
here
my, don't
before-
stir it up too much. Okay, all
Obviously,
right.
you don't. So, what do you think about you asked the questions, you came
Mhm.
up with the questions, you in mind. What do you think? Folks are out there making a decision right now about, and I'm calling it the performance of both candidates, realizing they didn't know what the question is going to be. They had 45 seconds there. There wasn't a lot of time for responses to things that folks may have wanted to go back on. What do you think about the performance of both candidates?
I appreciated that each candidate brought their story to the table. I felt like each candidate had a connection to the city, to their community, to the issues that mattered to them. I also appreciated some of the wonkiness, some of the actual policy discussions. It's what I also appreciated was the opportunity for the back and forth without it getting, going to depths that you don't want it to go to. I think it's really, I think you get a lot more from the candidates themselves when they have a moment, when they get to go back and forth a little bit, because that's where the differences are painted. I can ask a question and you can get your basic answers of we need more of this, we need more of this. What I really wanted to know is how are you going to get this? Because that's always the question. The city is dealing with the $260 million budget shortfall. Things aren't necessarily, you just can't go pick something off the tree and it's there. So I would have liked to have gotten more into that, but what the candidates brought and what I appreciated, and I think what voters can appreciate, is we got to see who they are, in addition to hearing what they believe or what policies they think should be in place.
I'm going to interrupt this post-debate conversation for about 30 seconds, then I'm going to give you a chance to say final words to our audience. The interruption is this. First of all, we are so proud of you. And happy to have you on the air and doing what you were doing.
Well,
so congratulations.
I wouldn't be here if it weren't for pioneers like you who have been in the city and serving communities throughout Seattle. So my accolades go to you. I appreciate the compliment, but I would not be here were it not for folks like you who care about the community, who aren't afraid to ask the questions, who aren't afraid to say, hey, you didn't ask the right question, because that's how things get fixed. And that's how things get addressed. And as journalists and as people who serve our communities, that is our job. And you have served as that example for Seattle. So you're the bag of chips. I'm the crumbs. I appreciate what you have set forth and the initiative you've taken to serve specifically the Rainier Valley and this community.
Oh, well, thank you. I humbly accept that from you. I want to give you the opportunity here to whatever it is that you want to say to our audience about this debate, about the performances tonight, about helping our audience figure out how to make a decision, how to use their individual, very important vote. The floor is yours.
Well, the key word, vote, is both a noun and a verb, but it's the verb, it is the action that is most important right now. You can sit in your home and think about these issues, but actually casting your ballot, you can talk to your friends about the issues. You can be the most versed person on a certain topic. It doesn't matter if you don't vote. So I will not I'm not going to say somebody won or somebody lost this debate. It was a win for the people who were listening, who were watching, because it further informs their decision. And when you do vote, listen to yourself as well. It's not just about hearing what the candidates had to say. Turn inward and really, if there's something that if there's something that just didn't sit right, I think we are given these spidey senses and these tinglies for a reason. And it's important to not just go, oh, I'm just going to fill this out and be done with it, but really ask yourself the question, what matters? Did this candidate answer my questions? Because you have the power. It is up to you individually to use that power to affect the change that you want. And yes, it sounds like the lecture you've heard growing up, but it's a lecture and it is so important, so important. I don't have to tell you folks how important this election cycle is. And it's not to say this is the only one, the ones before us, the ones after us. It is just about voting. Pay attention to what your heart, to what your mind, to what questions you still have, and don't dismiss them. They're there for a reason.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this. And personally, thank you for bringing up Rainier Valley. Again, it scared me because sometimes the context, when you hear
Yes.
Rainier Valley, folks,
The guard goes up.
brains immediately go to what they hear
Right.
on mainstream media.
Yes.
But I'm glad you brought it.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I'm gonna answer, but
so what about the Valley do you think is not presented properly in terms of what are the positive stories? Since you say, when you hear Rainier Valley, people get their, there's that. And I shouldn't say that that's what people do, because I don't get that reaction when I say Rainier Valley. I quite comfortable. Quite comfortable. What are the successes that we as journalists, we in the mainstream media, are missing?
how much time do we got?
Oh, well, it's your show.
Well, there are incredible individual stories within South Seattle residents that happen every single day, where people humanize each other, where people care about each other. We live in this community where we all don't speak the same language, but we figure out how to mutually respect each other. Education is highly valued in South Seattle. And a lot of times we don't hear about that. We don't hear about the folks who are doing things in South Seattle to make sure that our youth get educated. So I could go on and on and on, but the easiest way for me to say it is there are everyday incredible people in our community that maybe don't belong to an organization that take the personal responsibility to say, I care about my community. I care if things are happening in our community. I care that if the word about our community is negative and getting out wrong, and because there may or may not be a well funded organization, that concentrates on that has an executive director who's paid to do that and has staff that's paid to do that, you don't hear about it. And we don't brag about it because we just do it. I can go on and on. Thank you for that.
Well, like I say, it's fair to ask the question, and it's fair to hold our press and journalists and mainstream media accountable.
Yeah.
We answer to you.
Well, much continued success to you.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
I'm sorry?
Always a pleasure.
Oh, okay. I'm a little hard of hearing. It's not you, it's me.
Hey, look.
And I didn't wear the headphones. I said, no, we're not going to put those big cumbersome headphones on. I didn't put my hearing aids in either. So I just thought I would wing it. And anyway.
That's okay. I have an ear infection. So we'll just kind of balance each other out. This is my good ear. And yes.
Angela King, Morning Show KUOW. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tony B.
All right. Who do we got up here? These lights, I can't see anything. But again, you're listening to the post-debate show where we're looking for initial reaction immediately following the debate. There were some contentious areas in this debate. And Tanya Woo here with us now. Tanya, thank you for coming back. Thank you for coming earlier. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for what you do in the community. The question that I asked candidate Rinck, which I'm going to ask you, basically she said, now I'm paraphrasing here, you didn't know what you were talking about. And I'm talking about, again, very quickly, homelessness, affordable housing, $12 billion. I saw you raise your hand and you wanted to respond, but you didn't get the opportunity to. I'm giving you the opportunity to straighten that out with our audience right now.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, thank you. Well, thank you for all that you do. I know how important Rainier Avenue Radio is to the community. So basically, when she mentioned the 12 billion was in reference to how much it would cost to house everybody, the first number they tossed out was 22 billion. Then they lowered the amount to 12 billion. Like, I don't believe we could put a cost to housing. As someone who has built housing, and also someone who sees what the housing environment is now, and there's all types of housing when we're talking about do we get people who are formerly unhoused into. There's tiny home villages, there's supportive housing, all the wraparound services. And so, I mean, I don't know what the number is, but I don't think putting a price tag on what it would take to solve our issue, I think is reasonable, because I believe this is a tough issue. It's a complicated issue. I don't think it's solvable. It's not a quick fix, but I think we could definitely take steps to get closer to a solution.
Another thing that came up was transportation. This may or may not be something close to you. I'm thinking it might be. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I didn't hear about it. The issue of what's taking place with the light rail location in the CID, which doesn't just impact, although it heavily impacts the CID, but it doesn't just impact the CID. It impacts all communities. What are your thoughts? Do you have an opinion on where this light rail station should be? Just in general, since we're talking about transportation, I think this is a really big deal. There's a lot of money going into it, and it's talking about moving people from one place to another on a large scale. Where do they get on? Where do they get off? Your thoughts?
Yes, this is something I've been passionately not fighting, but involved with in the last couple of years when we first heard about Sound Transit citing the station location. Before I even ran, I did have a position. But one thing I do notice, and you are totally right, line 1, the siting of the station will greatly affect whether you're going to be having a what-seat ride to go to the airport, a 2-seat or 3-seat ride to get around. And it's a complicated subject with rerouting the Bellevue line, and of course, West Seattle and Ballard. And where the site will be determines where you'll connect along those lines and how you will get to the airport. That will be very different than what we're doing now. And so basically, the community is very divided on 4th or North and South. We absolutely did not want 5th. 5th would have taken away 3 city blocks from the Chinatown International District neighborhood that would have not been guaranteed back to the community. As we saw Sound Transit, when they first went into the CID, they took away 3 blocks. They promised they would sell it back to community, but that simply wasn't done. It was, you know, as you can see there, it's a parking lot and Vulcan's offices are there. And so 5th was absolutely off the table. And now we're looking at 4th and North and South. Depending on who you talk to, both sites will displace and gentrify the community. Both sites will mar the community in construction and transportation and getting around and just fright issues for many years. And so I believe both sides are different, but their arguments are the same. And I think waiting for the EIS to be published and what the alternatives produced is going to tell us a lot of information that we may previously not know about. That'll help us educate us into picking a good decision. And I know money is not supposed to be part of the decision-making process, but it very much is, unfortunately. And so I think the most important thing is making sure we listen to communities, making sure that outreach engagement is being done all along line 1, Rainier Beach, Beacon Hill, because that affects, like you said, everybody. And I simply believe that outreach engagement is still ongoing, but not to a point where I feel confident every voice has been heard.
As you know, once it's done for 100 years.
Yes.
It is what it is.
Yes, and we got to do it right. So I think that's really important, and making sure you do that meaningful engagement, listen to communities. And I know that people, I've met with so many different groups who are like, no build option. Why don't we put in the existing tunnel? How come we didn't look at the parking lot in the stadiums? Like, but you know, I think there are a lot of studies and factors happening, and I'm hoping within the next couple months we'll have some clear answers, and hopefully community will come out to voice their opinion.
Well, I'm basically asking you similar questions that I asked
Okay, great.
of candidate Rinck, and I asked both of you before. What is it that will make folks in our very diverse city, where we have very different neighborhoods, comfortable with feeling that you understand this neighborhood you represent? Do you think that the moderators did a good job of allowing you the time, given that you only had 45 seconds, to showcase what it is that you feel makes you the best candidate for this at-large citywide position? Do you feel the moderators did a good job of that?
Yes. Well, my whole goal going into tonight was to show the contrast and difference between myself and my opponent. I believe, you know, we're both great candidates, and I think the moderators did do a really good job. It's very hard to explain very complex issues within 45 seconds and then having 20 seconds for rebuttal, because there was just, I could talk all day about housing and about public safety and how, you know, how that affects our babies and our children. But having to condense an answer, I feel like it's very hard. And then I abhor lightning rounds, because they always ask you yes or no questions for very complex issues. And there's not always a black and white to everything. There's always that little gray area. And so I believe, you know, I hope that we made that contrast clear and have given voters an idea of how different and similar both my opponent are.
It's ironic that you say that. One of the first things that I said to candidate Rinck was, I think that was a waste of time. I would have rather heard some more valuable information about our communities answered than what I thought were foolish questions that really didn't have to do with it. That's just my opinion.
Oh, okay.
But maybe it was fun, you know, and
Uh-huh.
maybe there was room for fun. That was just my opinion. There were things that I would have rather heard. The other thing, I want to give you an opportunity, which I asked candidate Rinck as well. Where did you think that you showed these are the differences between us two as candidates? Or maybe there weren't, but now was the opportunity in the debate where you clearly were able to define, this is why I am who I am, and this is where we are different. And I'm not saying who's right or wrong, but giving you the space right now to share with our audience, because you only had 45 seconds,
Yes,
where these areas were, if there were areas that existed.
Well, I think we both believe in a comprehensive approach. We want to help our young people. We want to help our small businesses. But I think a lot of my approach is based off of experience. I think that's also the biggest difference between my opponent and myself. I grew up here in Seattle. I've seen the changes in South Seattle, especially. I have built housing. I have a small business. In 2020, I started a community safety group that not only addressed larger issues happening in the city, but very specific issues in my community. And so all those experiences kind of lead me to my views. And, you know, I'm on the ground. I don't consider myself a politician. I never thought I would be running. But as a community member, as an on the ground, boots on the ground person, trying to help my community as much as I can. Every single weekend I'm in encampments. I'm at 12th and Jackson. Every day I stop by my family business and chat with other business owners and people come into the restaurant residence. I'm doorbelling constantly. And, you know, I believe, you know, the priorities when it comes to public safety, my views are very clear. You can see through the votes I've made on city council. And I think it's very clear, you know, my opponent doesn't agree a lot with what the Seattle Council is doing. And so making that difference very clear to give voters a good choice between the two of us. Not only do we differ in approaches to public safety, but when it comes to building housing, I've built affordable housing, workforce housing. I'm working on legislation to do that. So right now I'm looking at how do we look at development rights, air rights, to be able to allow buildings to build and finish their projects, looking at how we save trees, offering density bonuses to allow for people to save trees on their properties. I'm also looking at legislation that will use the multifamily tax exemption credits, but allow a density bonus for them to get those affordable units built in. I know we're looking at MFTE currently. We're also looking at MHA coming forward, and those intricate housing policies is what is my passion is in. And so the comprehensive plan, especially, we need to build more, but how do we do that meaningfully? I come from a community, we all come from a community that faces gentrification, displacement, and what that looks like in different communities is different than like North Seattle, for instance. So every community has a different need and a response. And I grew up in these communities and have lived here my entire life. I think another thing is, you know, in terms of working with the city, things may not be perfect, but I think we're making steps in the right direction. A lot of things we're doing in the public safety sphere won't see overnight changes. There isn't like a silver potion that will just, you know, make all of our issues, will resolve all of our issues. But we have to do something. And a lot of times I talk to people in the doors in their houses who tell me, you know, they want to see something. They're desperate for action. And, you know, we and the city council, it's faster to burn something than it's to build something up. And we want to build, and we want to build that strong foundation, but we need to, if it mindfully, we need to look out for unintentional consequences to be able to go forward and make sure that these pieces of legislation will still hold in the next couple of years, but always leave room to reassess. So we're building the accountability aspect into place too, and measuring everything on data and having accountability with results as well. So these are all things that I'm focused on. And I do have concerns with my opponent. You know, her experience was with the King County Regional Homeless Authority. And while, you know, this organization is still in the process of reform, I think her leadership in that organization, I'm not totally sure what her role was, but how would she, you know, using what she has learned and what she's done at the King County Regional Homeless Authority, how would she apply that to the city?
You're listening to the post-debate show right here on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Candidate Woo, I want to give you the opportunity for final words that you'd like to say to our audience that's listening and watching as well. I'm assuming you might want to make the case for why they should vote for you, but whatever you want to use this time for.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. So one of the things I'm most proud of is the Community Watch group on the ground. We've been going on for 4 years and still strong. We're out there helping our seniors, our elders. We're also out there at Tolton Jackson, going to encampments. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to roll out an initiative called Community De-Escalation Teams, fighting for that in the budget process to empower community members, to empower people. You know, it's similar to Block Watch, but not necessarily. I know for Block Watch, it's housed in the police department. My initiative will be housed in somewhere else. But having the resources to empower neighbors, you see someone tenting down the street, to be able to go out there and do some outreach and engagement, help connect people to services, neighbors caring for neighbors, housed and unhoused, and then especially how do we go out and de-escalate situations that we see. Not every response needs a gun and a badge. And until we could build up our social, our case managers, our social workers, and the care team and lead and reach, I think it's up to us to contribute. And so kind of using that community watch model where we talk to people, we build that trust, we build that rapport, we have meals, we have water bottles, we build that trust, allow people to accept services. Because a lot of times when we talk to people, I get the sense of hopelessness. That's why they're addicted, they're engaged in unhealthy behaviors. It's because they lost hope. And there's that poverty in money, and there's poverty when it comes to material things, but there's also the poverty in human connection. And so how do we allow people to be seen? And a lot of people I talk to, they're like, you know, they're so thankful that we see them, we talk to them, we treat them as equals, because they tell us living on the streets is tough. People treat them inhumanely. And so how do we, as a whole city, try to help resolve these issues by treating everyone as equals in a compassionate way and trying to get people to accept resources, and how do we offer these resources? Because we're not going to be able to police our way out the situation. We can't case manage or casework. It's truly going to be all of us contributing. And that's something I really believe is important and hoping to fight for in the budget process. Also in the budget process, I want to fight for more services and outreach, especially to, we pass soda and soap, and my opponent says, there isn't the resources currently. We know very well that's the case. And that's why in the budget system, we will be fighting for more resources, especially to fund our care team, to fund Lead and Reach. I fought to save EDI, the Equitable Development Initiative. I fought for having $20 million for youth mental health to go to organizations in the community. And so I think we're going to see a very similar process play out in the next 2 months with the budget process. But I grew up in South Seattle. I know these community groups and how important they are. And so that's my priority going forward.
Thank you. Thank you for running for office. Thank you for being in office. And thank you for running again. Tanya Woo, appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Okay. We have, again, this is the post-debate show where we're getting immediate responses from folks. Yeah, come on over. Oh boy!
Don't get away from me. How you doing, my friend?
Alicia Crank, Executive Director, Seattle City Club.
Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you again for doing this and putting this together. And I know that there are people helping you, but under your direction.
Thank you. And I'm just glad that you're here to do this with us. This is important to me.
All right.
Yeah.
Your thoughts. I'm not even asking you a question. Just your thoughts on what happened this evening.
When I got here a little early and got to kind of see what was happening behind the scenes, got to sit in the audience the entire time, and now listening to both the pre and the post interviews that you've been doing. It's been very insightful for me. I'm just so glad that we're doing it here again. I think you know this about me, is that I felt that it was very important to make sure that we were getting these debates into the communities, not just in downtown. Get to where the people are. And two, I wanted to make sure that we had diverse media partners that were a part of this, like you, like Converge, like Washington State Standard, because they have different audiences, and your audiences are not the ones that are normally reached out to, that are normally brought into the conversation. So it was very important for me to make sure that you were a part of this and to do it in a way that was authentic for what you do. Overall, I think the candidates did well. I was thinking about what some of the people were saying about the lightning round question. And what I'll say is this, I was talking to Rinck's campaign right before she left. They have like 10 more of these things to do. And God knows how many they did up to today. And I'm a big believer in interpersonal leadership, and that's a part of civil discourse. So the reason why I was okay with the lightning round questions is because I think we get a very short, if not at all, opportunity to see the candidate as a person. Every other debate, forum, town hall is going to hammer them with the questions and the issues, and there's a lot. But I think sometimes we forget that there's a person embedded in that candidate or into that elected official. So for me, it was kind of nice to kind of see how they thought about the lighter things and see how that might also influence their stronger questions or their stronger answers. Because they came from this environment, this is why they're staunch on this piece as opposed to that one. So you can't make everyone happy, but I'm proud that we did that. And I'm also proud, and I hope you picked up on this too, is that we did have a lot of audience questions. And we made sure to let the viewers know that this wasn't just about the handful of moderators coming up with their own questions, we infuse that with what the community asked about. And so that doesn't happen at a lot of other debates, town halls, forums. And so I hope that that rang out to people as well, to know that the ones that we do, the ones that we plan are for the public, for the general public, not a closed studio, not a select group of people, but that everyone gets an opportunity to be in that space.
Yeah, I think this particular debate was important again because it's an at-large position
Absolutely.
that is citywide. And I want to, and I think this is important for you to share for folks who might be going, well, wait a minute, that's a sister. How did, I'm just saying, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do I get in position and what does it take to, because often we are on the outside.
Yes.
Of what is involved with putting something like this together? And I'm just going to share my quick.
Yeah.
I don't care if the Mariners win the World Series in 20 years or not. I want to hear about community. Anyway, that's just my. But what is involved in putting something like this together, in being in position to say, okay, well, you know what, this is how I want this thing to roll. I have to work with partners. I have to do. I know that's a way longer answer than we have time for. But kind of just if you could share some of the intricacies of dealing with.
Yeah.
I said dealing with.
That's an accurate phrase.
You know, trying to put together a series of debates from candidates from all over the state.
Yeah. You know, it's a lot of work, and I would say a lot of the foundation is relationship building. I think that to be in this role I am now, that it took a lot of building relationships along the way that were positive, that people can go, okay, we'll work with you. Okay, we want to come in on this. You know, for example, I would even look at this year. I purposely have fewer media partners because I wanted it to make sense. And so I wanted it to be advantageous for everybody. And I think that partners that know me know that that's my mindset too, is that I want to make sure that not only am I successful, but that you're successful in this as well. I mean, this is a perfect example, right? In the debate coalitions before, we had nothing set up like this. There was no pre-game and post-game, interviews. But I was like, but that makes sense, and that makes sense for you. That's what's advantageous for you. But not everyone is receptive, and like you said, sometimes people will come to me asking, who's in charge, and I'm like, it's me. And they're like, and they kind of look at me like, are you sure? I think in my whole career trajectory, I'm used to being questioned and having to prove myself in a space. And maybe one of the reasons why I ended up here is because I show up in places that were not normally. I served and currently serve on, aerospace boards and commissions. And they're like, you're not on a DEI commission? I'm like, no. Why is that the only place that you feel like someone that looks like us should be? Why can't we be on planning boards and land use? And I've done those too. And so I think being able to show up in those spaces where it definitely feels uncomfortable, and at the same time being able to break some stereotypes along the way, that when it comes now to saying, okay, I want to plan this big thing and I want to reach out to those same people who maybe gave me the side eye at first because they thought I was the DEI pick, then figured out I actually know what I was doing and talking about. So when it's time to say, okay, let's partner together, I think it makes it easier for them to say yes.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh, we're supposed to, or we don't want to look bad. So I hope it's been a lot of the mostly good relationship building that happens along the way, and being able to show mutual respect.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm getting the rap sign.
Yeah.
But like everyone else, I want to give you the opportunity for final words that you'd like to share with our audience.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, obviously, thank you for your time and talent in bringing this together. And for people that are watching, again, your voices are as important as anybody else's. And there are resources that are out there beyond this debate, beyond other websites that are going to have forums and other things going on like that. But don't be afraid to step into the room. Don't be afraid to step into the forum and say, this is what's important to me. What is this? What are you going to do about my community? We've been left out way too long. And so don't be afraid to be the only person that looks like you in the room, or might be the only one that's going to ask that particular question, because that question is still valid. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm hoping we can talk to you again tomorrow.
Of course.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Do we have?
That's it.
Okay. I'm going to make a final statement here. You might not want to be sitting there, or you can.
Nope, I want to hear it.
Okay, when
I'm
you
with
make
you.
the statement, first of all, thanks to Converge Media, thanks to Seattle City Club for putting this together. Again, the whole point of this is to provide you with information about the candidates so that you can become a more informed voter. The reason why we do these pre-debate and post-debate conversations is to give you an opportunity to learn more about the candidates that are running for office and to learn more about the moderators who are asking the questions. The questions that are asked can drive the whole debate. And so this is volunteer. You don't have to show up to the pre-debate. You don't have to show up to the post-debate. We had both candidates here for the pre-debate and the post-debate. We had Angela King here for the post-debate. Josh Cohen showed up for the pre-debate. It's all volunteer. The only person who didn't show up was John Hopperstand. I'm not cool with that. And I don't know why John Hopperstand didn't show up. Watching the debate, again, I wish he would have just given us the opportunity to find out who he was. You can watch the debate yourself. And John, I'd like to give you the opportunity, if today wasn't convenient for you, to come on Rainier Avenue Radio, and then let me ask the same questions of you that I asked of the other moderators. Why is this important? Is because you can choose not to do this. From my community, we don't always get that option. I do have a voice and I'm using it. And so I don't think that was cool. Maybe you had wonderful reasons why you chose not to come on the pre-debate or the post-debate and just be asked a couple of questions that are central to what was taking place here. You had a big role in this debate. So I'm just sharing that right now. And again, I would like to provide you the opportunity to come on Rainier Avenue Radio. There won't be any animosity unless you bring some, but I'm not cool with that. For our audience, you don't just get to say, I choose not to participate. You get to do that, but you do that with me saying, I'm not cool with that. Thank you for joining us here at the post-debate conversation. Again, Rainier Avenue Radio, I'm Tony B. Special thanks to Converge Media, our partners. Congratulations to Converge on your distribution deal with Fox Soul. Special thanks to Seattle City Club, again, for once again having an inclusive debating process that brought media together so that we could share information with our audiences who want to hear from the candidates and the moderators. This was all volunteer. I appreciate all of the moderators who came down and had conversations with us, the candidates twice, except for John Hopperstand. Am I belaboring the point? Yes. You get to choose not to come. I get to point it out.
That's right.
That's it. That's all the time that I have. That's going to do it for the kid. It's me, your host, Tony B, saying, remember, whether you believe you can or whether you believe you cannot, you are probably right.